making sure it still worked.
All good. Where does one find a copy of that software?
One buys it from me at the thing later today.
How much is it?
The software and hardware combination with a cable for the 2C, well, without the cable for the 2C is 60, 65 for the combination with a cable for the 2C.
Okay. So it's like a Mockingbird or something?
It's
Custom sync.
it's a custom. It's software on the 2C,
Yeah.
or software that is making the sound.
Oh, is it? Okay.
This is a MIDI interface for it.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I'll explain all that in the presentation. But essentially, it turns your 2C into a MIDI synth.
Yeah. So can we just PayPal it to you? Like, can we PayPal one you do?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool.
You can use the software alone, and I don't know how much that is. What I'm selling is the bundle.
Yeah.
You can use the software alone and just play on the keys.
No, I want the MIDI interface.
Yeah, you want
I've
the
got a Commodore 64 MIDI interface. Like I said, was set up pretty as well. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's your Apple II?
2C.
2C? Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you got the headphone jack and you can go and record.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. All right. So that's already working. That. And where's my soda? Is this my soda? Morning. Do you play piano?
Yeah.
Would you mind coming up and playing a little something when I ask for a volunteer?
You can play chapsticks.
Yeah. Sorry?
I can play chapsticks.
I don't want it to be too loud and pull people away.
That'll do. Hey, since that one microphone was getting a little weak, I wonder if this one should be battery used.
Test it as well.
Oh yeah, oh, we were very weak. But that me too.
There's pretty much on 2 octave keyboards.
Well, we should open the new one. Oh yeah, banjo actually. Open here it says, it'll be easy, it says.
Do you need a knife?
There we go. I'm getting some progress made here.
Yes.
Oh,
can.
seconds or something.
Well, if you can, I mean, you can play for release, just a
Yeah.
couple noodle on for release for a little bit. That'd be great. Just like I said, as a demo, because all I can do is I can mash on the keyboard, but I can't play. I mean, I can't play anything more than a scale.
Okay.
So, but we got 10 minutes before I start. Maybe 4 other people will show up.
I'm sure some.
Was that Peter Gunn?
Yeah. Actually sounds pretty good for speaker stuff.
Lights. See? Not just haven't turned them off yet. Okay. Much about thinking flip the switches and not now.
I can just reinstall some lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure do that. Okay.
Do you want to run the presentations this week?
I shall do it. I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready to do it.
Yeah.
If you guys are, you can grab one of our new community members.
That's fine. That's running for now.
Sure. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, we're all here. Question for you. Do you want your machine to play with us?
Oh, sure.
Can I take it down?
Sure, where?
Wherever you want, man. I'll give it to you.
Oh, awesome.
That was fast. That's a high speed one.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, now.
I actually finished with that, so
Good morning, Kansasfest. It's nice to see your bright, shining faces this morning.
Good morning.
We're ready for our first talk of the day. This would be Charles Mangan talking about how to turn your Apple II into an 8-bit weapon. Here we go.
Thank you for waking up with me this morning. I promised to continue. Let's get this situated here. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to warn you, there are going to be some potentially loud sounds produced by an Apple IIc during this presentation, so don't be surprised if you hear a giant wall of sound. If your hearing aids are set to high gain, you might want to turn them down. There are no flashing lights, so don't worry about epilepsy or any photosensitive shocks at all to your system. So I'm Charles Mangan. You might recognize me from previous Kansasfests. This is my 6th, I think, we determined. And I've given a couple of talks about mice and things in the past, and I've also demonstrated this particular piece of software in a much more elaborate setup in the past. But this is going to be more of a how-to so that you can take the hardware and software that I'm presenting today and do the same kinds of things that Seth and name escapes me Michelle. Seth and Michelle of 8-Bit Weapon do when they're recording their Apple II based synth albums for 8-Bit Weapon. So you can do this with your own hardware and your own musical talent, such as it is. So the first part of the puzzle is the DMS software. The latest release is DMS 2. for the Apple II. I believe it requires any Apple II with 64K or more, and some kind of serial card for the stuff that I'm demonstrating today. But it doesn't require a serial card. You can play directly on the machine itself without any serial interface, just by playing on the keyboard. Did I see a question in the back?
It requires a 2E or 2C. It requires an enhanced machine.
Okay, so it's a, okay. Sorry, I misspoke. It requires a 2E or better, and I believe 64K at least of RAM. Sorry, thank you, Ivan, for clearing that up. So this is the screen that you see with DMS, and this is the actual playing interface, as you can see live over here on the 2C. Without further ado, a quick demo. So this is the main playing interface on the DMS software, and you can see we've got the notes on the keyboard here arranged with the notes on the piano keyboard. So if you type escape for 1, you get G sharp, an A sharp, tab with A, Q with B, etc., etc. And this is where the sound comes in. So that is the acoustic guitar setting. I like the banjo myself. It also has piano. And if you want to do the real bleeps and bloops, you can do square wave. So that doesn't have any attack or sustain, it just has the straight up square wave and a sawtooth. So you can do more traditional sorts of Apple II bleeps and bloops. I think my favorite probably the clarinet. And that's the general interface for the keyboard for DMS. There's also on the flip side of this disk piece of software called DMS Drummer, which is the same general interface, but instead of musical notes, you have drum kit sounds. So there's bass drum, hi-hat, clapping, lasers, various things that you can do to turn your Apple II into a drum machine. The, am I on the mic? Percussive maintenance seems to work. No? And how about now? No, okay.
Oh, now
It kind of cuts in and out.
the other one's on the.
Yeah, the other one's on the 2C.
Yeah.
Is it?
I did just
Change the battery. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'll try not to shock the system too much. Anyhow, so that's the basic software interface. Without any additional hardware, you just run software, play on the keyboard, and you can record and sequence your own music, save it to a floppy disk, play it back later. If you want, you can record that as audio out to a computer or tape or whatever, and just play that way. But since we're here to talk about making music, the next obvious step is to hook this up to something that you can either play pre-recorded sequences or play on a real keyboard instead of a computer keyboard, and be able to actually play with the existing talent, or like I said, such as it is. I don't play the piano, so I'm asking Melody to play the piano for me. Just give me one moment while I get things set up. So What we're going to do next is take MIDI signals out from the Mac. So MIDI is the music interface for microphone again? All right. I'll just talk louder.
Yeah.
Maybe the microphone doesn't want me to talk too loud. I don't know. Anyhow, it takes, sorry?
Maybe just like in your pocket.
It doesn't like my pocket. Okay, it doesn't like to live in the pocket. All right. So what we're going to do today is take MIDI, which is the musical interface, digital interface, something like that, signals from this MIDI keyboard, and you can get one of these for less than $100, or you can get a full-on keyboard. You can spend considerable money and get full 88 keys, etc. But the interface is the same. It's generally going to be MIDI, and the modern ones are going to be MIDI over USB. So its physical interface is USB, and it talks MIDI, which is essentially a serial interface. So what we're going to take that out of the USB, put it into this this little box that I have here on my desk, called the appropriately the DMS box. And that translates that USB MIDI signal from notes on the piano keyboard into the keystrokes that I would be typing on the computer keyboard. So it turns the I want to play an A into I want to press the tab key. The DMS software on this side listens for those characters as if you were playing it on the computer keyboard, and then you rock out. Throw the horns. Anybody? There you go. Thank you. So we hook it up. The magic box here is called the DMS box, or the MIDI DMS. That's how it presents itself in software. And if anybody wants to come take a look, it's essentially a breakout board for a teensy Arduino clone. And all it's doing is, in hardware, is converting the USB signal into standard RS-232 serial signal. The cable between the DMS box and the 2C is a fairly standard serial cable. Get it from David Schmidt at retrofloppy.com. Did that work? No. I'll just talk loud for right now.
So is that the same serial cable as the disk transfer one?
If you're using a standard, if you're using a cable that'll work with ADT Pro,
Yeah.
I think we decided it is without hardware handshaking, or did we decide it was with hardware handshaking? I'm blanking out.
I don't know. I just know that on the 2C, this is only the 2C that we're talking about.
Right, because the 2C has weird
Yeah,
serial
2C has
handshaking
weird hardware
issues.
handshaking, and if you get your cable from RetroFloppy, he makes them in a special way to get around that problem, and it does not work with DMS. So I don't know which lines have to be connected in a serial cable, but a straight through would certainly work, but I don't know whether you need a full set of 5 lines.
Yeah, we can examine the cable in more detail, but for a 2E with a super serial card
Oh yeah.
or a 2GS, any working ADT Pro cable will work. The 2C has a weird serial handshaking issue, where if you in ADT Pro you set it to I'm using an image writer cable versus a standard cable, and that's the difference between the two. But if you get a cable from me today at the vendor fair, it is guaranteed to work.
Okay.
Yeah, and even the 2C Plus is fine. It's only the 2C that's an issue.
Yeah, the 2C Plus is fine. It has a different serial interface. It's just the 2C that has issues, and that's just a matter again of getting the right cable, or if you have a cable that doesn't work, either disconnecting or reconnecting one of the pins. And like I said, it's the cables that I have with me are guaranteed to work because they came from David Schmidt specifically for this purpose. And you can use that serial cable for ADT Pro as well. So it's compatible in that way. So this box, as I said, takes USB, plus does not, but there's a modification for that. The GS has a headphone jack. The 2E does not, but there's a modification for that as well, which I make this little tiny board that hooks into the speaker jack and turns it into a headphone jack. And I'll have a handful of those at the vendor. You take your MIDI software on your on your Mac or PC, and to choose which instrument you want on the DMS software, the MIDI channel corresponds to the instrument here. So if you start playing on channel 4, it will start playing on the acoustic guitar, and if you switch to channel 3, it'll start playing on the banjo. Does that make sense? Anybody here use MIDI software or music sequencing things? I know it does. So it's usually just a drop-down menu as to which channel you want to send your output to. And then if you're doing DMS Drummer, you send your MIDI out on channel 9, and it switches the keystrokes and the notes to be compatible with DMS Drummer, because keystrokes are slightly different, because there's not 8 instruments and there's not 2 full octaves or 8 full octaves or whatever it is.
Channel 10.
Sorry?
Channel 10.
I think it's channel 9. I'm not entirely sure.
I was using channel 10. Channel 10 is the usual MIDI track for drums.
Okay, so it's channel 10 is the usual MIDI track for drums. And if that doesn't work, MIDI channel 9. So if you were using channel 10, then that's great. 1 through 8 are the other software instruments. So here is a quick demo. So I've got on my machine a little piece of software called Alka Musica, which is let's just go ahead and mirror the display. You guys can see that. There we go. So this is a free or cheap piece of software called Alka Musica, and it just plays MIDI tracks, these .mid files. So I'm going to just start playing here. I'm going to choose the MIDI DMS as my output, and I'm going to play it on, let's say, channel 1 for the piano, and should start hearing music coming out. Oh, sorry, I skipped a step. We have to set DMS from keyboard control to serial control, and that is a capital X. So you'll see it's in serial control here. We've got the indicator on the screen. So once it's under serial control, we should be able to play MIDI out here. Okay, so you can see how that works. All that is being produced by the software on the 2C. There's no music coming out of the Mac at all. As you can see, I was changing the channel, and it changed the instruments automatically as I switched the channels. It'll play the full 5 octaves, or I don't know exactly how many octaves that are in the MIDI series of the full MIDI series of notes. The only caveat really with playing back something like this is it'll only play 1 track at a time, because the software or the hardware can only play 1 voice at a time. So if you play 2 notes, it's kind of a race condition. If you try and play 2 notes simultaneously for a chord, it'll choose whichever one gets to the machine first, or actually do whichever one comes second, because it'll clobber the first one. So how do you play the piano? If you are a musician and can actually play a piano or other MIDI instrument like a drum kit, you can do that again with this cheap piece of software, or something like Logic or GarageBand or anything that will make a MIDI sequence. So I've got my MPK Mini 2, which is this keyboard here, as the input, and the destination is the MIDI DMS device, and we'll do it on, again, on channel 1. And if my lovely assistant Melody will play a little bit. All right, thank you. And so now we can actually, since that's been recorded, we can play that back. We can play that back as MIDI instrument on the DMS. Hello, what's the clicking? Okay. We can play that back, having recorded it. Maybe we want it on a different instrument. And so that's the beginnings of the workflow, getting music out from the 2C. The next obvious step would be recording that either in the DMS software. So if you want to play and record your sequence in the DMS software and save it to a floppy disk to play it back later, that is possible with serial control or keyboard control. But if you want to record the actual audio out, you need something like a headphone jack. So the 2C is a perfect example. You just plug in a standard audio cable. You'll get one channel of audio back out to record into your recording software or into a mixer or what have you for live performance. If you then layer those performances, so I've got one track of For Release here, and then I've got another track. Da 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 da. So you take those two tracks and layer them in your recording software or multi-track or what have you, and you end up with something that you can then have your multi-track audio. So I did that earlier with. Thank you, Melody. Everyone. I did that earlier with a track that you might recognize. Let's see, turn off some of these tracks and.
Oh, cool.
So I recorded that in 4 different passes to create this. And again, all the audio is being created by so you see the ultimate result. And that's just one example. Obviously, you can do classical music, you can do modern music, you can do something with drum tracks, you can layer whatever audio you already have, but this gives you another instrument in your arsenal of musical instruments for either live performance or for recording, and you can make your own 8-bit weapon albums like Class Apples. So that's it for the demo. Are there any questions about the hardware or software? I'll try and answer any questions about the software. I'm not the author of the software. Michael Mahone is, so he'll be able to give you more detail about the actual technical side of things. I did design and create the hardware, so I can answer the hardware and the actual physical cabling and setup as well. Yes, John.
So when you are playing on the Apple II, can you record keystrokes, or is there any recording or saving or playback mechanism on the Apple II, or does it always have to come in from outside?
Yes, you can record on the Apple II. We switch back to the keyboard control. If you hit P for I think it's R for record or play. Yeah, so you hit. Yes, there is a recording mode in the software to record your sequence for later playback on the two. So you can download tracks from other places, put them on a floppy disk, and play them back with the software, or you can save your own to a disk. Yes.
And those would just be like a small MIDI file, just kind of
Yep.
what notes at what points in time, so very compact.
Yes, those are essentially note timings, and the files themselves are fairly small. It's not recording the actual audio to a floppy disk. Otherwise, you'd get 2 or 3 notes in and you'd run out.
It's not MIDI. It's not MIDI per se.
It's MIDI-like. Yeah, it's not. You couldn't then take that and play it as a MIDI track. It's specific to DMS.
Also, the DMS drummer software, as distinct from the DMS software, the synthesizer. The DMS drummer software has its own built-in sequencer, so you can write drum patterns or songs in without anything else.
Yeah, as Ivan was saying, he's more familiar with the drummer side of things. It has a built-in sequencer, so you can actually do a live sequencing performance, add drum beats to various points in the sequence and build it up live, and then save that sequence for playback later.
Is the hardware box compatible with the GS, and what does it cost?
The hardware box is compatible with anything with a serial port and anything with a USB port, so Mac or PC. And the box itself is, I think I'm selling them for $55, and then an extra $5 will get you a cable for the 2C. That's what I have with me. I may be able to scrounge a cable for a 25 pin for the super serial card or whatever. But so $55 for the box and software, $60 for the box software and cable.
Is the interface bidirectional, then it shows serial characters and MIDI out?
No, you cannot. It is not bidirectional. You can't play on the 2C and get MIDI out. There's better ways of getting recording a MIDI instrument into your Mac or PC. Yeah, you were demonstrating something with the game port. Yeah. In the back.
I just wanted to comment that I've been playing with this all weekend, using both the synth software and the drum software, and using MIDI controls, drum pads, and keyboards. It's super fun. It's like, and I took a track that I'd done in GarageBand or Logic, and I just changed one of the tracks to play the bass line on the Apple IIc instead, and it was awesome. So if you're into this stuff at all, there's something a little bit magical about using your Apple II as a synthesizer or drum machine.
Thank you, Ed. Any other questions or comments? I will have a handful of these available at the vendor fair, like I said, for 55 or 60 with the cable. I've got a few copies of the software. If you want the software without the hardware, I'll have to ask Michael how much for that, but I think it's going to be on the order of 25 or 30 for us for a floppy with DMS and DMS drummer on it, if you don't want the hardware box. It is commercial software, but it is not copy protected. You are on your honor. You're on your honor not to share it if you buy it, or to buy it if you want it. And that's what I've got for today. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I turned it off, sorry.
Okay, we have a bit of a break until the next session. It starts at 9:30. So get up, stretch, get something more to eat. We'll be back.
Yeah, there's pizza. Thank you, Melanie.
We'll take a full set.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's not just a vendor. Exhibition.
Hello, hello. That should be off.
Have new batteries been put in this bad boy today? I would like to do that. I'm doing 2 sessions today and I'm only recording.
It was recording, wasn't
It was, I just stopped it.
Okay.
But if it's still using yesterday's batteries, can we?
Yes, absolutely. That's a little piece of the puzzle. Wait, I don't know. We should have like a power adapter use on that thing.
Yeah. I unboxed it. I really don't remember having one. I had a download one, and I'm like, this model didn't.
Okay.
So, but I'm sure, yeah, maybe for next time.
I'm glad you're smart about this stuff.
Figure out what it needs. And
These microphones are still making me crazy. It was dropping out.
I can just be loud.
Can I talk to you for something? My session this afternoon about the laser thing. Okay. I have a bit of a surprise for it. I've been planning episode. I would like to have for my session and have it kind of ready and just kind of on the DL so that and during my session's going to start with just me on a laptop, like a digital show, and then I'm going to have to switch to one screen being 2C and one being the video player. I don't know how to do that, but it's technical, and I don't want to, it's only half an hour session, so I don't
It wouldn't hurt to come down ahead of time and kind of set it up and make sure it all works the way it
I'm going to run the restroom. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
What's the plan for a setup?
Using my computer and
Putting where?
I don't know.
Sitting? Are we standing? What are we doing?
At the podium? I mean, I don't know.
Well, no, just because I realized my notes are on my computer, but I can put them on my phone. Depends on like what.
Why don't we just? I don't know. We can squeeze 2 computers. I don't know. Whatever you think is best.
I
don't know about that. I say we do it.
Carrington, do you need the other projector?
I don't think so. No, we're just gonna go off one laptop.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
All these
Exactly, yeah.
So the that's Excel. That's fun.
Oh, you haven't seen how the enemy leaves. Ticker. He's trying to catch.
Do it, and I find it bizarre. It's the fact that somebody was bizarre and stupid enough to do it. It's twisted.
I agree with bizarre and twisted.
It was the right solution for me.
I mean, in order to get something like this working, you have to be not only bizarre, but also
deviously twisted and frankly.
self-loathing.
self-loathing. That is not necessarily an unheard of thing.
A poor decision done well.
Exactly, a poor decision done well.
Whose computer will need to plug in?
It'll be Kevin's. He's
Okay.
got the
He
deck.
He demand, huh?
He
There's
demand.
people with like,
He demanding.
you know, car mods that have
Alright.
like anime characters or whatever on them, and they're just, you know, meticulously painted and, you know, the vinyl, but it's just, I mean, ugly thing. But it's so well done. You have to admire it. I like that about Excel.
You want here?
Oh, yes, yes. Sorry to derail.
All of these colors are just a manually changing the background color in the Excel field to something that reminds me, like, okay, green, that's grass. Blue is water, and it's totally cosmetic, nothing to do with the program. The numbers in there are hexadecimal tile IDs for the shape tables in the Knox-Fest engine. And there may be one of the, sorry, but since the tile IDs were changing so much over time as they shuffle things around, I didn't invest any time. I suppose maybe I could now because it pretty stable. What I end up doing is I don't remember the tile ID. I copy and paste a lot. It's like, okay, I need to move here, move water there. So,
That's why some of it seems so familiar.
Well, depends if you want me to add this.
the subset of much larger labs now.
Parameters.
When we get down to a whole bunch of converting hex, decimals, maybe formulas, entire map template, then concatenating values.
I do have HDMI adapters. I have this older computer that actually has ports.
Yeah, mine has ports too. I'm kind of wondering about, do I want the new one that has nothing but a USB-C?
Oh, I have a plenty big stack of those. Just ask.
Plenty big stack.
Plenty big stack.
Plenty big stack.
Nope, 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 nope.
Basically,
Nope, nope. I'm gonna go get my microphone so we have a backup recording. Good, cool. I love this little thing. I'm sure it'll be fine, but I want backup.
Slaps on this .hs code, which stands for basic text data, and this is the final here. I paste it literally right into the source code, and that's it. So the process is like changing the tiles on the map, just doing the copy, paste, hit my build button, and then I can have a new map or whatever I change on the map on screen.
That's guy? Yeah. I think I had a friend who is a bundle. I have a big wall that's like this.
Yes.
I can sell you one on my
The outlaw had it.
I'll sell you the vendor card.
We'll do, yeah, that'd be cool.
Well, that's an interesting question. I definitely didn't know it existed when I started doing this, and if I had, I would have checked it out very thoroughly before making the decision. The amount that I know about it now, my sense
Sure, do it.
is that
Yeah.
coming out here probably doesn't fit exactly what I'm doing, and that may have either caused me to make it would have been one salary decision, or I might have any case. But definitely, they took a very different and interesting approach to it. Basically building tool designs for other people. Really awesome. Whereas this, I didn't design.
One's a deck and one's the notes.
It's very kind of specific to not so guys on that. Muck around in the spreadsheet. It's straightforward, but it's also very straight up. like, if on the map I start copy and paste a lot, I have to look at because cutting and pasting breaks the tables, and I'm introducing bugs that are hard to find by the time I get solution and screens. Sorry, steps you do. I can cut pieces and stuff. And that's not great for a tool that's designed but yeah, that's.
Since this is so specific to you, is it something that would be worth like having to
Have you ever tried it?
or do you not want other tools to look at?
It could also be useful.
I think it probably would, just in the sense that it kind of demonstrates maybe a non-operational for managing.
I'm still thinking about how those
So smart people fight.
Tells
Yes.
Your friends wait.
Exactly.
Gonna do it on the
That loves programming in 6502 wasn't necessarily a professional programmer that has all this experience in Java and everything else, and it's a way to kind of be able to do more on the Apple without that other experience, which could be fun, but what you want to do is Apple programming, why go through all that extra stuff running programming is really
Or even share some of the information or even macro code or whatever you do to use some of that. I think
oh, yeah, definitely use formulas to do that, yeah. Yeah, sure. So it's great, yeah, I think that would be
just image data into Excel and use it the same.
I think it can be done. I'm sure it can be done. The key is really the input format. I have experienced issues like I've tried to copy text data on CipherPress and paste it into Excel, and it gets lost with it doesn't line up in the columns, and I end up doing so much work just getting the formatting in the correct as well.
I'm thinking
yeah, there's no
diabetes sponsored by Wish I could say.
Thank you for your help with diagnosing and debugging. Thank you for your help.
Yes.
Well,
It's a really nice mic for it's $100. Works in a lot of situations, and it's got like 3 mics in it, so you can do 2 people doing an interview, or it can do a stereo with variable width. It's really good. It's Shure MV88.
Well, anything that'll take Windows over serial you can type it.
Right, you can type it, you can play it over, you can play
Yeah, and there are other standard
I like you.
music playing.
Who makes it?
Sure.
True, they can be excellent.
It's a good print.
Instead of tapping on it.
And it has 3 mics in it.
Okay, so you can pick which capsules are active.
Yeah, so if you're doing an interview, you could do 2 on the side, or you could do something. For this one, I'm doing the stereo spread and just on the web, so I can do all of them. So the problem, I mean, if you're doing something super long, you can't charge your phone while you're using it.
Right.
Well, that's not right.
But still, that's good. 926. Found my part, please. Just want to project on me, man.
45 pounds. It's never long.
Yeah. And he spotted a massive solar flare. I have this dead center of the working. You can plug him in right here. It's fortunate we didn't have our models because it caused like someone gets in there causing wires to flash.
On mine, is the USB connection. People were putting the computer and use it as a so you can just plug it into any. And it'll just get power from that. That's very big.
And caused starting fires.
Yeah, Carrington allows me to speak. If it gives me any time. Oh, I need power. I'm not going to make it through this thing.
What kind of? I've got.
If we had more electricity, we would have had some serious problems. Given the minor was that outage is not happening.
I think so. Perfect. Ta-da. All right. That's perfectly safe. Nothing's going to go wrong.
Okay, let's get into our next session. We have Mr. Vanston and Mr. Savitz talking about Infocom's non-interactive nonfiction. And take it away.
Good morning, Kansasfest. So yeah, Infocom is of course known for its interactive fiction games, but they spent their entire time in existence trying to create other things, putting out feelers and trying new projects, and it was trying to be it was a very innovative company. Many of these things did not succeed, but they were made the attempts. So this is our look. I didn't start the recording here. This is our look into the other things other than interactive fiction that Infocom did. So we're going to start with the Info Comics. These were comic books that you could play on your computer. Now we're not doing any of this chronologically. It's just comic books that you would play on the computer. This was something that was available for the Apple II, and the kind of the hook was you could go through the comic, see the story, and then at the end of it, you could go back and do it again from a different character's perspective. So you could find out why that character. Yeah, so it's not schlocky stuff. I mean the stories are, I think, meant to be a little schlocky, but it wasn't poorly done. Carrington.
Hello, I'm Carrington.
Watch out for the frostbite.
So I am going to talk about a different sort of book that they did. And we're going to start with the kind of books that are accounting. So I think it's important, if you think about the things that Infocom was doing that wasn't in their wheelhouse, that weren't their text adventures, you have to keep in the context of what was happening with their sales. And we're going to look at their sales in a series of charts. I couldn't find piles of money, so we're going to do mounds of dirt instead. So in 1982, they had this much money coming in. By 83, mound of dirt was much larger. 84 was a mountain. 85 began a different trend, and that crater just got smaller. So this is the context we have to keep in mind. So they decided to do something other than the interactive fiction games that they're most known for, and they said, well, let's try something different that's related to what we were doing before. And here we have one of their choose your own adventure games. They put out a series of these books. There's 4 of them. Now this is a doctored image. That's not exactly what the book looked like. We'll zoom in on the doctored bit, because they were not called choose your own adventure books, because there already were choose your own adventure books called choose your own adventure books. So they had to come up with a different name. What they came up with was, what do I do now books? Which I think is perfect for Infocom, because that completely encapsulates that feeling we all have when you're playing a text adventure and you want to throw your computer against the wall. That's the perfect name. So they came up with What Do I Do Now books. There were 4 of them in a series. There was The Forces of Krill, The Malifestro Quest, The Cavern of Doom, and Conquest at Quendor. They came out in 83 and 84. So we all remember how the mounds of dirt were big and huge in 83 and 84. That's the context of these books. So they're trying other things, but there's no desperation involved. These were all written by Steve Maretsky, and they all had something in common, exactly. So they're all in the world of Zork, and they're all written by Steve Maresky. He was one of the imps that had written a bunch of their best-selling games. He did Planetfall and Sorcerer and Mind Forever Voyaging, Leather Goddesses of Phobos, which if you don't know, Infocom Games was an actual title, and he wrote, well, co-wrote, but mostly actually wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game for Hitchhiker. So real pedigree here, and these books are by him. Unlike the Infocom text adventures, these are written in the third person, so you're following Bill and June, two kids that get magically transported to the world of Zork. But like a typical choose your adventure book, you're basically following a path through the book. And this is the path that you can follow through the first book. You see how there's the choices. You get to the end of the page and says, do you want to go left, do you want to go right, do you want to use the wand or not use the wand? And it follows through. There is one path that takes you to a win. Everything else is a horrible loss. One thing that's different about these than choose your own trademark books is you get a score at the end. So if you get through to a certain ending, it'll say your score was 4 out of 10. It also lets you go back. We all know that when you use a choose your own adventure book, you stick your thumb in to remember your place. That just does it for you. And so you'll get to this end, they'll say, oh, you made a poor choice, you're dead, your score is 6 out of 10. Would you like to go back and try something else? If so, turn back to page 72. So it remembers the branch you came from. So that's kind of a cool addition. They released one of these books, the third one in the series, for some reason, was many years later, released for free, and you can play it online. And this is one of the places I found that you can play it online. You can either write that down, or really if you just search for Play Zork Game Book Online, you'll find a bunch of sources for it. We reuse this slide because we're going to look at really quickly at another sort of book they came out with. Later on, so in the late 80s, starting in 1988, so we remember where we are in dirt and crater time, they came out with a series of novels. There's 6 novels written by a bunch of people. There's Wishbringer, Enchanter, Planetfall, Stationfall, Zork Chronicles, and Lost City of Zork. The first 4 books really are companion pieces to the games of the same names. They are not they're not novelizations of the game, but rather, if you look at like the first Planetfall book, there is basically a sequel to the game, but just written as straight novels. They're not interactive. The Chronicles book is about the adventure of a hero named Miracles, but spelled with a K, like a rapper. And the Lost City book is about the origin of the world of Zork and the Great Underground Empire. And in case you are wondering if these books for you, I will say that the Lost Empire book features a winged vampire were-unicorn. There's no picture of that in the book, but the internet was willing to give me this. So that is essentially what you can look forward to if you look at these books. And they're actually relatively well reviewed, but they're a symbol of the kind of things they were just throwing out there to try to start digging themselves out of the big crater hole. So now we're going to turn to my co-host.
Come over here.
Oh, I'm going to say who was left.
The presentation. I'm enjoying myself.
No, to look at other things.
Other things. Another thing they tried was to create a board game called Fublitsky. If you were here at Kansasfest last year, or even this year, it's still here. We played the game Fublitsky last year that Carrington brought. We had a pretty good time. It's actually a good game. It's still here if you want to play it tonight or tomorrow. It's in the, I believe, in the lobby for anybody to play. So this is a board game with an actual with pieces with software for your Apple computer. I believe it was also available for the IBM. And in it, there are up to 4 players who play little dogs who go around the town trying to collect things. It's basically a treasure hunt. It's a lot like some sort of treasure hunting game where you look for things. It's like perhaps Clue, where you have to go from place to place, get information, and kind of deduce the things that you need, which MacGuffins that you're MacGuffining. So, Infocom was always trying to fighting against piracy, and this was one of the best ways they could do that. But you absolutely could not play this game without the stuff, So you needed the box and the board and the pens and all the things to write on and such. So it was kind of an interesting, feely, browsy package that you absolutely couldn't play it without buying it, which is interesting because nobody bought it. Nobody bought this game. Here's some beautiful screenshots from various versions of Fublitsky. Fun animation, nice graphics, very cartoony, requires absolutely no reading. It's all pretty intuitive. It's just like a little picture of a joystick, you know, when you have to press the button and that sort of thing. All iconography, all pictures. Here's the New York Times newsletter when they announced Fublitsky, a unique graphics strategy game, released in summer 1985. So let's talk about Fublitsky's financial deal. Like I said, it was released in summer 1985, and oddly, it was only available to people on the New York Times mailing list for 6 months. The only way to get it was to buy it directly from them, and I believe at the time it cost $39.95. And by winter 1986, it still cost $39.95 when it had general release to software stores, and that sort of thing. No one was buying it. Nobody bought this thing. And by summer 1987, it was $14.95, a classic title. And by June 1987, it was less than $10. Nobody understood it. I think that people expected a certain thing from Infocom, and they were there for interactive fiction. And while this thing might have been fun, it was coming perhaps from the wrong publisher. People just
didn't have any friends. That's why I didn't buy it.
Yes, and also you needed friends, right? Yeah, this was right. So let's talk about how well it sold. In 1985, Fublitsky sold 500 copies. In 1986, it sold 7,700 for a total of a little more than 8,000. By the fiscal year '89, it had sold negative 714. That year, they had more returns than sales on that game. So it's a fairly rare game. Next, we're going to talk about Cornerstone, a sophisticated database manager for non-programmers. Cornerstone was also the ninth studio album put out by Styx. It was a follow-up to 2 albums that had hit the top 20. And it was recorded in Illinois at Pumpkin Studios.
He's doing this for me, so that's what we should talk about. No, please go on.
Didn't you have another section? Wasn't that supposed to be in here?
Where's my
Where's your section?
slide, dude?
I don't know. Let's go get it. Let's switch back to your thing. I don't.
Do you not have my slides?
How the course do I get in there? Here's your
That's
stuff.
me.
Oh, I see. I had one. All right. Look, we're professionals. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Cornerstone will be coming. Research Styx. Cast your mind back. Farther back. Too far back. Here's where we are. So, get you in the mindset. We're now going to talk about the game Journey. Not the band Journey, although Journey and Styx could have been this entire, I was going to say podcast, this entire presentation. Breakfast Club. 1985 is the mindset. So we remember the hills, right? Where we are, 1985. So at this point, Infocom is divided into basically 2 camps. One camp wants to stick with text adventures, but add graphics and sound, because that kind of stuff is coming out and it's beginning to eat their lunch. One camp wants to give up on that stuff and do other things. We have to try new stuff. We have to go a totally different way. It's in this context that the game Journey gets released. The game was by Mark Blank, another one of Infocom's implementers, who was particularly good at the tech side of things. He pushed the envelope with the parser early on, and here he is pushing it again, trying to push forward and change what an Infocom game can mean. But the camp that wants to do something different doesn't want to leave behind the main thing that the text parser gives you, which is that depth and variety of storytelling. Infocom is a storytelling company, and so they want to still offer that. They just want to try to offer it in other ways. So anyway, that's what one of the focuses is, to not be a typing game anymore, because there's these things that are coming out, like the Nintendo system has just been released, and it's going to start eating everybody's lunch. And what about that amazing Philips CDI? That'll probably be huge. So there's going to be a lot of game platforms that are not keyboard-based, and that's going to leave you high and dry if you're a text company. So one of the ideas is how can we make games that were great on a computer, but can compete in a world where there aren't necessarily going to be game playing keyboards? What do we do if we don't want to do just like a point and click adventure, because that doesn't give us the storytelling and the depth of choice and interactivity that we want. So one idea was to bridge these things and do a storytelling text-based game, but instead of typing, you will click on stuff. And so that's what's happening here. So that's how Journey gets born. So we have a graphical adventure, lots of text still, lots of story, but these beautiful graphics. And in a very token-esque, like this really wants to be a token thing. So on the bottom there, you can see there in the screenshot, there's a list of the party members. And Tag, the one at the very bottom, is the hero of this story. He's the one telling what they call the chronicle in this game. And rather than typing your commands, you click on people and then click on a verb, click on something that modifies the verb, and then say click on a target. So in this case, what you see is somebody has clicked on the verb cast. Somebody's going to cast something, then they pick the elevation. So casting elevation at, and at this point, you're going to pick a target. Who are we going to elevate? Who are we going to levitate? So, so we have to remember, because one of the goals here was to target things like gaming systems instead of typing on the old parser. So that's a really important thing. And it's still giving us that depth of story and puzzle telling, and puzzle solving and storytelling, and so that's really important. And to give us these amazing graphics. So another advantage, a thing they were really trying to target, going for broad audience, is something where it's very difficult to die. Like really, there aren't going to be any major negative endings, and it's very easy to navigate this. So it's a very accessible game. Except this is none of those things. If you get good more than halfway through this, you start having to type stuff into a command line. I don't understand. Like you play through the game, and you click, 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 and by the way, here's a command line, start typing. That's an interesting implementation if your target is things that don't have keyboards. Also, well, technically, there's very few ways to die in this game. There's a ton of ways to simply run out of things to do. And I guess they considered that not really dying. So you cast spells here by using regents. And the regents are components that you can cast a spell. And you'll have storytelling, you'll have puzzles, you encounter a puzzle, and you can solve it in multiple ways. Pick a spell. The spell will use up a regent. Hope you pick the right spell, because maybe you'll need that regent later in the game. Another hour, another day, a month from now. You get to the point where you've just run out of stuff to do because you used that regent way before. Too bad, start the game again. So that's an interesting mix of having these clear targets, but kind of fumbling it, which is what Infocom did a lot in the late half of the 80s when they're in that crater slide. It's still, though, an example of Infocom sticking in their wheelhouse and trying something new. Well, this game isn't necessarily a success by a lot of metrics. It still is Infocom being Infocom. It's Infocom telling a story. They're trying to say, what can we do, still be Infocom, and maybe game into the 90s. It wasn't successful, but at least this is an example of something they did different that had, I think, laudable goals. They just fumbled the ball.
What platform is that screenshot?
This is from not the Apple II version. I couldn't find it. This is, I think, from the PC version. It was released for Apple II, though. This is one of the games that released for a bunch of platforms, including the Apple II. Then we come to Quarterstaff. That's another one I'm going to talk about briefly. So Journey either is or is not Infocom's first RPG game. Because it had all those RPG elements. You've got multiple characters and things they can do and abilities and stuff. So it's very much an RPG game, but also a text adventure. We have Quarterstaff, which Infocom bills as their first text adventure, or as their first RPG. And it depends, whether that's true or not depends on a few things. One, whether or not you consider Journey an RPG, and two, whether or not you consider Infocom to even, or Quarterstaff to even be an Infocom game. So Quarterstaff, or to give it its full name, Quarterstaff, The Tomb of Setmoth, was released by Infocom for the Macintosh in 1988. So we all remember where we are now in 1988, how deep that crater started getting. And so this comes out the year before Journey. It's much more traditional RPG. It's got adventures and monsters and spells and stats and stuff. It's basically trying to emulate the pen and paper RPG stuff. So that's very different than the text adventures they did before. It's a complete departure now. It does things, even all the little tedious bits, like keeping track of your fatigue and how much you're carrying, and all the stuff that nobody actually really likes from the pen and paper stuff. It was lauded as having a great enemy AI, including creatures that can like learn from their mistakes. It got a 5-star review in Dragon. Like, things were awesome. You could even split the party, but you should never split the party. So one of the big features that Infocom promoted, I'm going to read you a quote here, because this was a Mac program, and although not their first Mac program, but in the status line for fall 1988, Infocom proudly proclaimed the following. It has pull-down menus that actually allow you to easily point and click your way through even complex sentences. We've included Apple's hierarchical menus, usually found only in top-notch business products. That was one of their big pushes for this game. You got hierarchical menus, which sounds like a great idea, right? How would you like to have to do that for every sentence? Now, although it was a Mac game, the one thing they did right, though, is you can actually play this game completely from the keyboard, because Infocom is very much still a keyboard-oriented company. So this clearly is an RPG game, and it clearly came before Journey. So why would I think, well, maybe this isn't Infocom's first RPG game? Because this wasn't made by Infocom. So here we're beginning to get into this era where Infocom is publishing other people's stuff. And it isn't just that somebody else made the game and Infocom published it. Somebody else wrote the game, created the game, published the game, and released the game, all before Infocom got involved. So what happened was a company called Simulated Environmental Systems made this version of the game. They made it first, the year before Infocom. 1987, they create and release this game. Fully released, advertised, everything. It's out there as a box. The release was really well reviewed. It also got a 5-star review in Dragon, which seemed to give a 5-star review to everything back then. So what happened? Lack of money. Like, everybody's got a creator.
The microphone is cutting out.
Oh, is it?
It doesn't like pockets.
And we don't know how to fix it. Hit your pocket and you'll be good enough.
I can be louder.
Well, yeah.
Turn off, I can be louder.
We know
So,
that already.
they ran out of money, and they could only do a limited release of this game. So it came out in just limited release, and it did have problems. There were, for instance, a bunch of bugs that made it impossible to finish the game. But Infocom looked at this and said, "There's a lot of stuff here that's like what we would like to do, and maybe this is the kind of game we'd like to make. And it would be much faster to simply buy that game. It doesn't matter that it's already released. So they buy up the game, bring it back into Infocom, and then make a bunch of changes to it. So they have Amy Briggs, who had written an Infocom game before, Plundered Hearts. She does a rewrite on the text and tweaks all the plot. They have a bunch of graphics people and editors give the game a big polish. They add a bunch of feelies like they did into the package, and they put in a parchment called The Path to Enlightenment, a wooden druid coin, and a big poster, and then sent the game back out again in 1988, now as an Infocom title. It actually has a cult following. The revised version is one you can actually complete. And although Infocom, so they had announced they were going to release that game then for the Apple IIgs, but they never did. So we'll very quickly look at now a couple of other things. BattleTech. Now we're back into this idea of games that, are they Infocom? Like, they've got Infocom on the box, but it's a different sort of thing. So Westwood Studios made the BattleTech game. But unlike when we're looking at Quarterstaff, which is a company, makes a game, releases it, has a bunch of problems, Infocom says, hey, let's do a do-over. They're contracted to make the game. The idea is from the beginning this will be an Infocom game, but it's not being made by Infocom, and it's very different than the stuff you'd be used to. So Westwood would go on to develop a whole bunch of very successful titles in the 90s. Like, they're the guys behind Command and Conquer. And they basically created the real-time strategy genre, I think with Dune 2, which came out in the early 90s. This is their first game for Infocom, this one, which is really the game that put them on the map as a studio, because this comes out in 1988, so we're deep into dirt crater time for Infocom. Over half the staff by this point at Infocom has been laid off. They've been sold to Activision in a fire sale. So it's a very different company, but it still is Infocom at its heart. But this game is just produced by another company and then published by Infocom. And it's, again, a major departure for what you'd think an Infocom game would look like. It looks like this. It's a graphical game. It's a strategy war game. The goal in the game is to pilot a 3-story mech. And I would presume there's plot, but really, come on, you come for the mech, you stay for the destruction. You just go walk around and destroy all the things. A second BattleTech game was developed by Westwood, and it was a sequel, BattleTech: The Crescent Hawk's Revenge. Basically the same deal, walk around and destroy stuff. That one was released only for the PC, though. The first one, and this is a screenshot from the Apple II version, whole bunch of platforms, including the Apple II. Second one, just for the PC. Second one comes out in 1990. So in a lot of ways, the BattleTech games kind of straddle the death point of Infocom. So the first one is released in the late 80s. It's essentially commissioned by Infocom, but it had a different look than a typical Infocom game, different mechanics, a totally different developer. There's not much Infocom in that Infocom game, but at least the Infocom on the label is referring to the company we all think of. Like, it is still at its heart that same thing. By the time of the second BattleTech game, then, which is also by Westwood, the Infocom on the label is really just the words Infocom on the label. It's got nothing really to do with the Infocom before. So it's not that BattleTech was the last Infocom game, but the two of them as a pair kind of are an archway over the death of Infocom. And super quickly, we'll just look at the covers of a couple things. Other games that really had the same thing going for them. A different company makes them and Infocom puts them out. We have Minds of Titan, which was released in 1989. Looks like this, also developed by Westwood, so same sort of deal. Let's get another company to create a thing, we put it out, different sort of game, Infocom's on the cover. It was a single-player RPG, but it was released for the Apple II. They also did Circuit's Edge. Now, Circuit's Edge was also developed by Westwood, but just published with by Activision with Infocom on the title. And in this case, it's one from 1990. It's essentially a game that has nothing at all to do with Infocom, even the people that would have been at Infocom. It just happens to have Infocom on the box. And this is a hybrid text adventure and RPG, so it's, you know, kind of Infocom's wheelhouse in that way, but nothing to do with the company, and is based on a book called When Gravity Fails, which was the first book in a series. So I think the thinking was, oh, if this game's successful, it could be a series of games. It was not successful, and there is no series of games. But you can see how Infocom goes from doing a text adventure, producing and developing and publishing company, to being just a publishing company, to being just a name on a label. And that's the arc. We go from dirt to crate. And now, more. What happened? What made this crater? What contributed?
I will
tell us.
I will tell you what made this crater, Carrington. Sticks. Cornerstone was the 9th album released by Styx. It was done at Pumpkin Studios, and it was a follow-up to 2 top 20 albums. And they had a lot writing on this. They really did.
Do go on.
It was also a database manager. Infocom wanted to get into business products. They created a business products unit. They were running their own business, and they started creating software to run it, and they were always reaching out to find new lines to get into. They knew interactive fiction wasn't going to last forever. They saw the graphics cards. They saw games with sound, and they didn't want to. They wanted more legs on their stool. So it was time for Cornerstone. Developing Cornerstone, we've tried at every step to anticipate what a sane or insane person might attempt to do next. There's a critical difference between Cornerstone and the games. While the games strive to make life more difficult, constantly thwarting your best efforts, posing enigmas, even leaving you dead in some remote wasteland, in Cornerstone, we've done everything we can to make things easy. You'll never need Invisiclose to use Cornerstone because we've given it a help key. Wow. It was generally well reviewed for a new business product. However, keep in mind, at the same time, sequel was also starting to appear. And what was that other one? D-Base was starting to appear. And Cornerstone was good, but was not from a business company and could not really hold a candle to what those other things could do. Here's a certificate of birth that was sent around as a memo at Infocom. Child's name, Cornerstone. Parent's name, Infocom. Date of birth, January 31st, 1985. Attending physician, business products. A gala birthday party has been planned for Cornerstone on Thursday, January 31st, 1985. Festivities start at 5, with refreshments to be served starting at 6. Second floor here at Infocom. Don't miss a celebration of Infocom's newest family member. A good time is guaranteed for all. And at one point, it did beat out D-Base 2 on the sales charts. They the number one, let's see, when was this? Actually, this was undated, but at this time, Hitchhiker's Guide was number 1 entertainment, and Wishbringer was number 3, and Cornerstone was number 27 in business, beating out D-Base 2 at 28. And there was a party for that too. I think there were just a lot of parties when we worked in Infocom. It was on the soft sell hot list. So let's do some timeline. I started in October '82, and the thing wasn't released until January '85. They worked on this product for a long time, and it took a lot of resources. Cornerstone is generally accused as the thing that killed Infocom. And that's a complicated truth. A lot of things contributed to the death of Infocom. But Cornerstone was one of those things. It was a sink of time and a sink of financial resources. They created this business products unit, and it ended up failing. Had they taken those resources and put them into something else that did not fail, then yes, Infocom might have survived a lot longer. Did Cornerstone specifically kill the company? No, but they gambled on the wrong horse, for sure, and that had a lot to do with it. So October 1982, the Business Products Division was founded, and they started working on Cornerstone. And it was announced in '84. It was released in '85 for $495. In September '85, Mind Forever Voyaging was released, and they started doing layoffs due to Cornerstone's commercial failure. And a few months later, in February '86, Ballyhoo was released. So they're still putting out good stuff. I mean, info on the text adventure side, man, they're still killing it with Mind Forever Voyaging and Ballyhoo. I mean, this is like their peak game. February '86, Ballyhoo comes out, but Cornerstone is now 1/5 the price at $99.95. And then by June of that year, Activision buys Infocom for a penny, for nothing. The Digital Antiquarian says Infocom could likely have survived if they had avoided Cornerstone and made smart business decisions, and the world of gaming would doubtless have been a better place for their tradition of literacy, thoughtfulness, and innovation. Well, I guess that's it. Do we have any more, Carrington? Any summarizing up? Infocom was a great company that did great things, and I think that it really comes down to they did one thing very well. They tried to find other things to do well, and they put their paintbrush into a lot of pots, and nothing else really stuck. And that's why we have no Infocom today. Boo.
Boo. Atari. Anybody have any questions?
Well, you probably covered it before I came in. There's two questions. One, what platforms did it run on? And
did what one run on?
Did their Infocom, I guess it's different programs, must have run on different platforms.
Yes.
Yeah.
And two, do we ever see Infocom alumni at K-Fest?
Question one, what platforms did they run on? So the games were made with amazing sort of virtual machine. The text adventure games could run on anything from a deck PDP through PCs down to you can run them on a current modern Mac because all you need is a simple lightweight virtual machine. As far as the other stuff, like Cornerstone was just a PC product, and then some of the RPGs and things were
like Mac and then PC.
Mac and PC, and
then just PC.
Yeah. So it really varied, but for it depended on the era, the time. And have any Infocom alumnus been here? Not that I know of, but
I don't think so.
They're welcome.
Very much so. It was a
But
question.
they ran on the Apple II, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
So Cornerstone was not for any Apple product?
Cornerstone was not for any Apple product. It was PC only, because that's your business machine.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you know anything at all about what's under the hood? Is it just sort of indexed sequential files with a UI or
What's under the hood? No, I don't know. I haven't reviewed that yet for the Eaten by a Group podcast.
Anything else? We're good. Thank you.
Well, we have a break until 10:30 for the next session,
And so
What is the next
get up
session?
and stretch and meander.
What's the next session?
Teaching an old Zork new tricks.
Yeah, I looked up after the first one. I looked at it and I'm like, holy crap, it's like 9:40. So we're going to 10 minutes. So my second one, I'm like, and I will go on. So
we only did half an hour. You thought we were going to run way long.
Then we had, well,
You can talk for another 15 minutes.
no, it's okay. I did my first one. I ran through Zork.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought it was we were going to run way too long. And I looked up and I'm like, oh, we both done our first half of it. And we're only 10 minutes in. I'm like, okay, now I will stretch. Like you just adjust as you go.
Yeah, when I test my things, I often find that I talk faster.
How's that work?
Than I actually go.
I can't talk faster. Limit of fast.
I hate you.
I hear that a lot.
Not you.
Yeah, just and then I was doing the switch and it did nothing.
Yeah, it's like and now the whole app is going on. So
When did you get your So you're 80 this year? Just birthday, yeah?
Hello.
Apparently there was a commercial. You wouldn't have it any other way. This guy was. Apparently, judging by the comments. This is much okay. No, not. Wow, look at that. Can I take a photo of that?
Here's where we go. So, get your minds.
Didn't you say you gave him 97?
My first was 98.
Was it 3 days or 5 days?
It was funny. Wednesday, Sunday.
I've seen them all.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Oh, so I guess it's my first, yeah, I missed.
Oh, sure, right, yeah.
Go for it. Yeah, the thing is, I didn't know for 7 years. When I got back to the meeting, I found out that
I see. Oh, good. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, see, I was struggling.
I love
now I'm retired.
Less than hour.
If they would move it so later. See, what happened is that, because they've always done it on the 6 hour week, this, I've got a number of weeks to 8 weeks, so that's part of
That one, thank you.
That one year.
Oh, you see it's not, take the final,
Oh, yeah, she's doing the intro things. What do I do to help her? I've got 3 of those. Oh, cool, yeah, she was very accommodating. Oh, yeah, I think the actual she's what are you going to do?
what are you now? There are a lot of celebrities there.
If anybody here is doing Hackfest, despite what the schedule says, judging is actually going to be after lunch, not now. And what will happen is the judges will meet up in the lobby upstairs, and then we'll make the rounds and try and find us, or we'll try to find you. But if you don't run into us within 15 or 20 minutes at the end of lunch, you probably missed your chance. So be aware.
Very aware.
Is it still at Apple College?
That's an excellent question.
So it was at Apple through 2004.
Possibly, yeah. We'll try and get started right before.
A lot of really good sessions. Really interesting. I want to do the fast HDR and us.
Yeah, that was
I'll do that. I'll try to find mine. And remind me if I forget. Also, I need two more judges, volunteers, one programmer, one non-programmer. Cool.
Non-programmer.
Sure. Never mind. I'm good to go. Thank you. Carry on, enjoy your code or things.
Answered a lot of things.
Oh, he didn't come into it?
Hey, Cornerstone is the best game Infocom ever released. That's what I said.
Oh, I see, then he would have missed that.
Oh, darn, I got that.
Journey was fun too.
Either, oh no,
I can probably go
Right.
back.
very short, it only has like 3 puzzles before lines.
That's in all my.
That's a good point.
Or Sea Stalker, which is specifically aimed at kids.
Right.
It's specifically aimed at kids, but it's less fun. Kevin didn't like either of those, so he might have opinions on either.
I didn't like Sea Stalker when I tried to
Yeah.
play it. Moon Mist was good.
Yeah.
I also the other one that's an intro game that's pretty good is Wishbone.
Oh, you know what, that might be a choice.
I had a hard time with it though. I couldn't get through it, which is weird.
Well,
I was overthinking something, I'm sure.
it could be something like that. But nowadays also there's some boosts and stuff, so if she gets stuck, there's where you used to.
I'd probably start with Moon Mist. I thought about it. Better that than learning or
Just absolutely.
100 Hearts. 100 Hearts was
fun.
buggy as hell.
Yes, well, I really liked it.
So buggy. And an unusual number of things where like there'd be something in the description and you would like, oh, let's look at that. And like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yep.
That happened a lot of 100 Hearts, more than any other.
We talked about it all the time.
Thankfully,
That's a bad
Recording is easier.
Yeah, that one was unfortunate. Like it was a good story that would have been an excellent game
It's not my
if it
favorite
had
ending of all
been
the
fit.
so far. There's one of the many endings. There's multiple.
Right.
and for the screen, that microphone is
Instead of
taking
ending
care
with
of
the
this.
guy, you leave him, he gets killed, you grab the boat, row away.
This thing here isn't it?
Yeah.
Like everybody's like, screw you all, I'm gonna see the terror of the 7 seas.
But
That
it's
is the best ending.
That is.
It's the best ending of any game we played. Just like, all the guys die and you become the pirate queen. I love it.
Actually, before Jason thought that would be better, and I was saying, I don't think it's actually everything is effective microphone. The only thing this does is it does use a speaker. The other half of the which is an advantage, but it's just a stereo.
One of which is my first intro program. It's 11.
I just had meant to somebody.
It's okay. Map of, that was the sort of thing that those tools were doing.
Ah, right, oh, okay, yes.
Greg Templeman, he was when he was in high school, his high school got chosen to do a competition where they had teams of 2 players, and they would sit down with a beta of Bureaucracy, and whoever finished it first got a complete set of all the Infocom titles as a prize. And this was a Christian school, private school. And so the copy of Leather got us as a photo. It's called Something We Stirred. That was in that bundle.
Yeah, we're actually.
He wound up giving it to me.
That's a good one, but that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I struggled.
Bureaucracy was tough. And actually, so was Hitchhiker's Guide was also tough because just the degree of illogic.
Yeah, exactly. I really.
It was
liked
a
that one. Going back
great
and
game.
forth
So,
in every
oh
line.
yeah, so much fun, but really, really weird, difficult kind of thing.
But that's
because of
what
the logic.
Infocom really wanted was another. We needed another Hitchhiker's Guide. They needed.
Yeah.
It was amazing games that were.
A Mind Forever Voyaging is beautiful.
Which we haven't done. I can't wait. That's one of the ones.
I haven't finished it because it's just, I mean, I get creeped out by about a third of the way through it. I get so creeped out I cannot play it. But
So the button on the bottom.
Trinity was one of the best games period I have ever played.
Apple II is in serial control. There's no way to return it to keyboard control.
One of the best stories and the best told stories
is trapped.
Okay.
That button will either send the correct character back to the Apple II to return it to keyboard control.
Okay, cool.
That's the trick. So it's mini USB
and just the way Mickey
there's serial.
the
Do you need a mini USB cable?
in Hyde Park and all of that. And it's like everything is quiet and it's unnaturally quiet, and all of a sudden the alarm goes, the siren was, I mean, it's just like this, and you can almost feel it.
So good. I love it. Really good.
Try and test if this works, I'm going to do my whole presentation on it, so.
I mean, you always have a lot for the classics, the Forks, and the Changer trilogy and all that.
And I like the funniness of it. There's what you say is that I remember these puzzles and liking them. There's too many like Sonic games and movies that
Changer was fun. I like those better actually.
first.
Your power supply, sir.
Oh, yeah, I see the stickers. That was, I really like that particular model. We just had a little smaller. And it's Toshiba. Which one is its own thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all in Japanese. Maybe. Oh yeah, Toshiba. Yeah.
What is it?
Helps you use that.
Spellbreaker.
We have a winner.
Thank you.
So, we've only done this first tonight, but we love it.
Yeah. And I love the way, I love the spell system. Feedback, the funniness of the.
We've done 2 of them now.
Did we do Spellbreaker? No, did we do Sorcerer?
We did Enchanter, Sorcerer.
We did Sorcerer?
We've done 2.
I remember doing Sorcerer.
Yeah, the one with the maze where you try to do a bat.
That was Sorcerer. We all did a Sorcerer. I thought that was all Enchanter.
Well, it's all.
This is the 3D maze thing, right? Okay. I remember the 3D maze is a bat. I remember dying in it because you run out.
The Witness was the first Infocom game I bought.
Wow, okay.
I played tons of them before then, and had tons of them, but it was the first one I actually bought.
That's one done.
Throw the sack at the troll. You roll with lamp.
That all works quite well.
So far.
We'll see if it works in an hour.
So you have your one working.
All right, so I want to be here for the entire presentation. Or I need to move my rig somewhere else.
If you want to be there, then be there.
It'd be easier for the recording purposes if we could move.
Why? All we have to do is repoint the camera and move that thing. No big deal. It's really not a big deal.
Maybe not, okay. I guess that's the best.
I think this is going to be the best spot because I'm going to want to type stuff. I don't want to get in the middle, in front of the projector.
Okay.
It already works when it's right here.
Something to be said for that.
I can't overstate how important that is.
Well, it can be like in real estate, location. So.
Okay. I mean, I don't need the lectern. I could use the lectern. We could bring it over.
If that's where you want to be, then be.
That's where I want to be.
Okay.
Fine. Good. Great.
What's our what's our T minus?
10-15 minutes.
Oh, plenty of time.
Oh, yeah.
Plenty of time.
That would come help with just moving things over. Do you need the lectern over?
He said he didn't need it. I think we just need to move the recording gadget.
See what's connected to where.
I'm looking at we want to move that.
Yes. What is this power? This power is that light.
This powers that light.
Because we'll have to unplug as it goes through.
It will be a problem. Okay, so having him over there will be a problem as far as the sound for the live stream. Because that's here. We can get this unconnected so it's not blocking the wrong thing. It's not blocking
The light didn't turn off, so it was on. Oh, it was.
Because I plugged the wrong thing. And he won't be lit for the sake of the video. That actually is a problem being over there because he's not got light, he doesn't have sound.
I really thought we could do it. But maybe you're right. I mean, I think you're right. If he's not using this projector, he can sit over here because we'll have this projector off.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a rocket on his shirt.
Well,
It's awesome.
I don't want to be the one who moves the apple.
it won't be the end of the world.
No, we're thinking he could, if he's not using this projector, we can turn it off and he could sit on this table.
Oh, we just close the little shutter on there. I cannot stop.
it's good.
I noticed
Just where it is, it does. No, no, actually, no one's going to say that it's not. But if you I'll share it.
Well, I zoomed in pretty close.
Oh, okay. So, okay, yeah. That sort of looks like it was better than a daisy. Especially the way
You're missing a pin? Your neck's gonna,
I was
your neck is not
amazed
gonna
to
roll
see-
off your neck.
I mean,
Probably.
there's so much stuff that is still.
Then the doctor, I know that's all those things
I
for.
just happened to spot it, so I stuck it
Hooray for
in
Canadian healthcare.
this, blue
What crazy things you're teaching kids down here.
Make sure I drink it.
Ours also use Robertson screws, so it's a Canadian thing.
Well, and ours are probably not, you know, they're probably not metric, so we got a problem with just matching them up right there.
Very good. Yes. Take that. Take that. Got it. Take that. Huh. Take that. Oh. Lit. It's totally lit. Lit. Lit AF. So, are we doing it? Still not. I don't know. Depends on whether is it important that it gets recorded.
Well, it's going to be recorded. It's a live stream.
Live stream I don't care about.
So the live stream is the only thing that's gonna have an issue. If we move that microphone on the boom that's got the things like this, if we move that closer, the camera will be there.
Can we just turn the light so the light's coming over here?
Yeah, I think we're fine.
And I'm sorry, live stream friends, but you're not here. You miss out. I mean,
yeah, it'll be like a little teaser. But I think you're right. I think we just move the.
I have no idea how tight in everything is here.
Carrington, are you using both projectors?
I'm using neither. I'm not doing the session. I'm just helping set up for Mark's.
Kevin,
Just this projector. This.
later today I will be using both projectors.
okay.
Heck yeah.
And the live stream.
Which is
Carrington?
yeah.
Stand.
Be a mark. I'll be a shiny mark. Imagine I was less shiny.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Brilliant.
That'd be great.
Hacking. It's me hacking. I'm cracking and hacking.
What? Yeah, I'll look over that.
Cracking and hacking. Which is the mic that has to move?
Now, are they?
Cool. These.
I think so.
Oh. They've done that other years too?
Yes. And now I'm thinking about, you know, where we've been with Infocom. Yeah, Kansasfest 2018.
I think one of the things is there was such a tech story in the company. It's like, if I go to this business, I think that's why I switched something else. Business software. And telling you is that. And it's like scary. It's we wish hire Westwood to do that rather than say, become Westwood.
You know, it's not like we're going to be the first company to spawn off a subsidiary.
Yeah. All the money they put into Marshall, they could have bought Westwood. Since now was hedging our bets against. Because I remember there was a quote that says we don't want to $10 million. That's what he thought. I have no idea how big games were going to be. You can vastly underestimate the game industry, which is enormous still today.
So, what you need all that stuff down there too.
More than all of our money.
Crazy stuff. It's not crazy stuff. I thought they were setting up stuff for you. Okay. I see. That makes my life considerably simpler. Yes.
When they mentioned Infocom, they say that this one paragraph says tensions with parent company Activision or business decisions around a public database management program like Cornerstone, and failure to support an audience being moved by content graphics. That's the first I've ever heard of it. Really? And from that context, I thought it meant that they had invested
Oh, right, no.
And so the day after I read this,
No, let's tell you what it really meant. We saw you reading that. We thought, oh, no.
The announcement that it was the news report. I was like,
I still think we should have done our presentation on and during the so we completely misunderstood this. Yep.
Yeah, if you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've already talked about, do you know how to plug in?
Yes.
Okay. They had several issues where
The 5-minute one.
You're gonna be over here?
Yes, I'm just here, just slide nothing else. The rest is long.
I can't believe they didn't think of
that would have been perfect.
They might have thought of it.
I'm sure they thought of it.
I never thought of it.
Oh, that would have been awesome. The news order.
or the news order.
Sorry to interrupt.
The status
The status
one.
one. Which up in the news org post would have fired up. I would have went and rewatched everything just to support your legal plans.
Remember when I was in college, me and one of those freeware
Work off all the strategy. At least that's what it was.
we had it. Putting out order for the ecology thing, and they were having trouble with something and bumped into them at Outlets Go West, and they were talking about how they were almost trying to have trouble with such and such, it was something we'd already explained it to them, and they finished theirs, and we brought ours.
Is that just what's being live streamed? Yes. That's cool.
Yeah, that was,
You disintegrate chaos and madness.
There's no puzzles, but it's harder than others.
It is just disturbing watching, and it's actually kind of strangely relevant.
Did you ever play a text adventure called CIA?
No.
Okay. It was, I think in like a Nibble magazine, one that you like.
Oh, like a paper one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was like the first text adventure.
Oh, nice.
Just had some memories of it, seeing other text adventures.
Bunch of years ago. I never used it, so I did that. I did fucking new presentation. I'm going to learn and let's make it during this. I don't know. And it really was, and we were able to knock out a very quick. I learned that.
Welcome back. The excitement continues. And now we have Peter Ferry talking to us about teaching an old Zork new tricks. Take it away.
All right. So, can you port the Infocom interpreter M to Prodos next? This was If that helps.
I don't think it gets louder.
Maybe I don't get louder. Maybe the microphone will. How about that? Okay, so can you port the Infocom Interpreter M to Prodos next? This was how my day started in December, with a question from 4 a.m. Possibly at 4 a.m. The question he asked, it made me think this could be a huge time sink. But I had to try, and I was keen. This project became On Beyond Z Machine. Originally, 4AM just wanted to run Z3 games from Prodos. And when you start these old games, the first thing they do is ask you if you want to run in 80-column mode or not. But if you already know the answer to that, then there's no need to ask. So we added an option to automatically enable 80 columns, if that was the user's preference, without actually asking. And originally, when you run in 80-column mode, it's always lowercase text that's output. So as a gimmick, we added an option to make it always uppercase. And we added a structure at 300 so that we could keep adding more options as we went along without getting in the way of the interpreter. Here's a screenshot of the Z3 version of Zork 1 running in 80-column uppercase mode. Is it possible to have the interpreter output lowercase in 40 columns? That seems like an obvious question, but for some reason I wasn't expecting it. Anyway, we now have an option to enable lowercase output in 40-column mode. And here's a screenshot of the Z3 version of Zork 1 running in 40-column lowercase mode. It does actually look pretty good. We added a feature to allow saving the game to the hard disk. And we stored in just one file for all the slots instead of having one slot per one file per slot, which makes it a little easier to copy it around, and it's no longer tied to the floppy disk. And the save game remembers the last slot that was used by storing the slot that was used in the auxiliary data for the file, so that a front end like Pitch Dark can offer that as a first preference. I spent all night coding the save game part and sent it to 4 a.m., who released the interpreter the next day. He released it as interpreter P. The P stands for Prodos. I wanted to call it interpreter Q, but no, it's interpreter P. There was no discussion. I wonder if we can auto-restore a save game, because 4 a.m. loves his automation. Yes, we can do that too. We have an option to restore a save game as opposed to starting a new game. And we have an option to specify the slot number. It's done by intercepting the keyboard handler because the interpreter polls the keyboard directly, so there's no wrong routines used. And we do this by simulating the user typing the word restore and then typing in the slot number and then pressing Y to confirm the restore. Then we unhook the redirection to allow the user to type normally and actually play the game. Infocom games could print out the game as you went along. Could we create a transcript on the hard drive? Thanks to Kevin Savitz for reminding 4 a.m. about that one. But we can do that. We have an option to script to a file. Of course, we can do that automatically. And it's done in the same way as for the auto restore, but so we just simulate typing script instead. And it can be combined with the auto restore option. First we do the restore, and then we enable the scripting so that you don't end up with a transcript that begins with the restore text. But wait, there's more. You can also return to Prodos when you quit. The original interpreters would intentionally hang the system when you quit, requiring a reboot of the system. But now we can just return directly to Prodos. And the whole thing fits in 386 bytes. When we started this project, there was lots of space, and the code was really clean and really easy to follow, nice subroutines, nice layout. But then as time went on, someone kept asking for features. The space got smaller and the code got tighter. And it's still fine until this last feature. The quit to ProDOS was just enough to put me over the limit. And so then I had to get creative. Now the code is a mess of overlapping structures, instruction masking, branching to the middle of an instruction. To call it spaghetti would be a compliment, because there are only 389 bytes of space. Lost my connection here.
Battery going in the...
No, it's something else wrong. The wire, I can't figure out what it is yet.
So I have to yell?
Hello.
Maybe what's wrong with it is keep hitting on it.
Try this.
All right. Hot swap.
This has just been making me crazy.
Okay.
Is that making sound?
How about that? Still not.
Works. Now it's doing something.
Oh, it can have stereo.
Just talk loud.
All right, I have to yell. All right, so the Z3 interpreter uses a maximum of 47 kilobytes of memory. If there's less memory, it uses less, but if there's 48K, it will use only 47 kilobytes. And it explicitly avoids the BF page, which is perfect for us because it allows ProDOS to stay active in memory. We don't have to do any fancy swapping of the global page. And that other 1 kilobyte is the exact size of the ProDOS file buffer. So we can just call directly into the ProDOS MLI and we have file access for free. That's how we're able to get it all to fit. And sometime later, I decided to do something really crazy. I added support for Z5 running from ProDOS. And in case that wasn't enough, they added Z4. And then, 4M acquired the earliest versions of Zork 1 and Zork 2, which of course used the Z1 and Z2 interpreters. So I added those as well. Now we have everything from Z1 to Z5 running from ProDOS. The Z1 and Z2 interpreters are only trivially different from Z3, so it came down to just the patch offsets we had to apply to change for compatibility. So there was no problem at all to do those. And here's a sample of the Z1 version of Zork 1 as I experienced it in 1983 when a friend and I wandered away from our tour group and sat down at the unguarded computers at a nuclear power facility. That's a story for another day, but 35 years later we're still friends and he actually works there now. These days there are guards everywhere and you can't go anywhere without an escort. Anyway, that's unrelated to that. There's a really cool feature that I found while I was hacking the Zork code, and I was so surprised I told 4AM about it, but I wanted to keep it secret so I could do a big reveal right now. The only problem was I forgot to say so at the time. So 4AM promptly showed it to his 30 billion or so followers, and now everyone knows. But here it is. Z1 can do lowercase. The funny thing is that it actually unpacks in lowercase text and then explicitly converts to uppercase before displaying. So with just a little patch to disable that change, we have lowercase output in Z1. And of course, Z2 can do the same thing. The Z4 interpreter uses 62 kilobytes of memory, the other 2K being the monitor ROM. And it uses all 62K. There's no
no question about that. That leaves no room for ProDOS on a 64K machine because it's not right to require 128K to run a 64K title. So for that we use ProRWTS. And in case you haven't seen it, last week I released the code on my GitHub page to ProRWTS. I'll have the link to my page at the end of the presentation, you can see it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find enough space to enable scripting support. That might change in the future if I have time to review it, but for now it doesn't exist. And obviously there's no way to quit to ProDOS because there's no ProDOS to quit to. But the other features are present. We have 40 and 80 column upper and lower case. We have save game support with auto restore. And for this case, to save on code size, we require that the save game exists on disk already, so I don't have to create it. But to save on disk space, we use a sparse format that's only 5 blocks on disk, even though the file size appears to be 140K. And then ProRWTS knows how to write to the sparse file and update the structure on disk, so it does the right thing. You can still copy it away. And the whole thing is only 535 bytes. That space is just simply replacing the RWTS of the original Z4 interpreter. And we came in under the original size, but only just. Here's a sample of a Z4 title that's been launched from ProDOS. This is A Mind Forever Voyaging, one of my favourite titles from Infocom. The Z5 interpreter uses 127 3/4 kilobytes of memory out of 128K.
Wow.
The only space left is page 3, and not even all of it, and some other bytes here and there. Obviously there's no room for ProDOS even on a 128K machine in that case. So we use ProRWTS here as well. Again, there's no scripting support, no quit, but the same features, and it fits in 536 bytes. We split the interpreters into individual files based on the version of the support, which reduces the load time and allows you to copy just the individual interpreters for whichever games you want to play. If you're not interested in Z1, Z2, then you don't even need to copy them. We use the actual Infocom code wherever possible because they did such a great job with the interpreter. And really, I didn't understand what they were doing. I couldn't have rewritten it in the time we had available. And with the magic of auxiliary data, we can associate a data file with the interpreter that's needed. So we can specify that a Z5 file needs the Z5 interpreter. And so even if you rename the data file, you can still have an interpreter that can load the file. And that allows us to take advantage of a feature in ProDOS where the BY program, known as BitsyBy, will run a file called basis system if it exists when a program launch is requested. So we created a basis system that knows how to deal with the .z files being run. It queries the auxiliary data and then locates the proper interpreter, and then it runs it directly. So essentially we've created click to run. Here's a screenshot of my hard disk with some Z files and a directory full of the interpreters. There are 2 Z5 interpreters because the format wasn't particularly stable. We could not find a single interpreter for Z5 that could run all the Z5 games. But we did find 2 of them that could ultimately run them all. So we have different auxiliary data to separate the 2 of them. And here's me clicking on Enchanter, and it simply runs. You don't have to start up the interpreter, specify a game, you just run the data file directly. And there's one more thing. Are the save game files completely opaque? Would it be possible to get the name of the room you were in when you saved? This is probably the most evil question he asked during this entire project, because this part alone took more time than the rest of it combined. We can do it. And only took 2 days to add the Z3 games. It took 2 months to add the first 25 Z4 and Z5 games. Fortunately, I was able to refine the process, got a little bit faster as I went along, because imagine my joy and surprise when 4AM said, and now for Volume 2. Here's 40 more Z5 games. 10 days before the conference. So, 60 days to add 25 Z4, Z5 games. 10 days to add 40 more games. At the time, I said, I'll find a way. And then I said something else that elicited the response of, you don't seem very enthusiastic about this project. And so I had some stuff going on at the time. I wasn't, just caught me at the wrong moment. But I didn't want to let him down. So I pulled out all stops and added all 40 games in under 1 day. We can automatically fetch the room name, and the score, and the moves, and the time, and the date. And now we can also get the blood pressure for bureaucracy, the number of wishes left in Wishbringer, anything else we want to get, and in whichever combination is appropriate for the game. So we have Zork that has score and moves, we have Suspect that has moves and time, we have Mind Forever Voyaging that has time and date. You can display them in the right way. And it's just a small wrapper around actual Infocom code, and it's in a separate program that Pitch Dark uses to display its resume menu. So, thank you.
Questions?
No, there are questions. Okay. Yes, Chris?
So you said you only needed like 2 versions of Interpreter to run like all Infocom games?
2 versions of Z5 to run all the Z5 games.
Z5, okay.
But there's one for Z1, one for Z2, one for Z3, one for Z4.
And then how does it know which one to run? So is it the suffix or?
In the auxiliary data, we have 2 different values. And then the basis system that we created knows to look at these 2 and then pick the appropriate Z5 interpreter.
That's a ProDOS feature.
Yes.
You mean the aux file type? Yes. Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yes, Ken.
If a hobbyist created a new game that used low-to-low sort interpreters, would your thing automatically be able to just like do it, or does it only work with your canned set of Infocom games?
No, our interpreter will run just about any Z5 game now. We've tested on a collection. These 40 new games are not Infocom at all. They're community games, just a sort of top list. We tested a variety of other games as well, and they all work without changes. For the save support, it's mostly data-driven. There's a game DAT file that I created. Just put the title of the game and the appropriate variables, indexes, and it will work too. Yes?
So, I guess what's out there? Are the games themselves available?
They will be. Mark will talk more about when that release schedule is going to happen.
So the stuff that's on your website at the moment is just like the technology?
Yes, for now. And I suppose Archive.org and Asimov will receive the actual game archives.
I want to put these 2 things together and play the games.
Yes, well.
Wait for 10 minutes.
Yes, you'll hear all about it in the next one. Other questions? Yes?
So, saving games to a slot number makes it
hard to figure out what you saved unless you like record what number corresponds to what saved game you have. Why don't you save games to file names?
You need pitch dark, and you'll see why. It has per slot descriptions based on the room name, the time, the date, score, whatever you're up to. So that's the solution for that, rather than using particular file names. Plus, I didn't have space to specify. The original Infocom games only had slot numbers, so there's no way to change the interface within the space we had to go further. Anything else? Okay.
All right, we have another short break now until 11 when the next session starts, so have fun. Have all the fun.
Less fun.
Thank you.
Is it too much fun? Yeah, it's too much fun. 10 minutes.
Who made you the fun police?
I did. That's the genius word group. There was a power back before you.
Too short.
A lot of things go as squeeze, it turns out.
And a lot of things.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Throw a light, move it in.
Why are you using the term, the word disgust and mark in the same sentence? What's that? Why are you using the word disgust and mark in the same sentence? Disgust is another pair.
Yeah.
D-I-S-G.
Oh, at dinner every night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So see, if he's going to be primarily over there, you probably could just carry it over there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
By the way,
why is that?
who knows? Maybe there's easy on that, right? I mean, easy, but it's just
Can we turn this one off? Can I turn this one off? Sure.
Yeah.
So are you going to be sitting the whole time, or nope? Sitting, standing, but you're going to be sitting here.
Exactly.
So I stand.
Exactly. Right.
You know, if you
And that'll help you gain features, right?
no, it's just for the audio for the. Am I still wearing it?
It may just be a barbecue.
This is the audio. That's how I got involved with the Denver Apple.
Yeah.
Basically right here.
Yeah. Should I have a lectern?
You bet.
Right there. Yeah, this is going to definitely retro. But they got the intention.
I hope so. Cool.
Yeah, so I'll let you know.
Sounds good. I know how I can help.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, wire me up. Steve, which one of these works?
So this is, neither of them work very well.
Okay,
You might
great.
well take one and I'll have to switch you if it stops behaving itself.
Great. Love it.
Yeah, ready to throw me against the wall. You have to turn it on. It doesn't like it, so yeah. Yeah, so it's working for now. If you have a better body magnetism that kind of keeps the power flowing, it might help. So
Great.
Solely Newcastle. It's that map Thanks.
I wish, outdoor latrines. These are good. Also in logistics, as you kind of effectively wipe out where they were the domain therefore we do it for ourselves. Like if you literally anything, you don't even deal with general public. You could random combo.
Yeah.
We've got an invisible fence on Mark.
So I freaked out and tested all those drawers last night. Just the one. Yeah.
Oh,
well, people have to be careful because they're getting hurt.
Well, I don't actually need to go that way.
Yeah, 27 keeps touching.
You can't go that way. The forest is too dense.
Your piercing whistle across your ears, forcing you back.
This that strap should get it too.
All right, for our next session, we have Mark Pilgrim talking to us about it's being too dark.
Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm a disc addict.
Hi, Mark.
I'm really tired of them. They've ruined my life. No, anyway, so when my older kid was about 4, I have 2 boys. When my older boy was about 4, I woke up and there were 3 discs in our Nintendo Wii. I didn't even know you could do that. But 4. And that's when I hacked our Wii and ripped all of the games that we had legitimately bought and put them on a USB hard drive and downloaded and installed a loader, and we could just boot up the Wii and select the game, and that was how they played. And they don't even remember, that was 10 years ago, they don't even remember any other way of playing games on that Wii. All they remember is that you just booted it up and all the games were there and you just picked what you wanted to play. So we just have heard a lot about the technology behind Infocom from Peter's talk. And one of the key pieces of information there was that the games themselves were data, not code. The code was abstracted out into an interpreter, which they then ported to each platform that they wanted to support, and that's how they were able to release games and updates so quickly on multiple platforms. That was their solution at the time. So we can take advantage of that, and people in the modern era have taken advantage of that, so that you can go find Zork1.z3. I call it Z, sorry, it's not Z. You're all wrong. That is the pettiest hill I'm willing to die on. No, actually, there are pettier hills. But anyway, you can go download the Infocom game files. Not, you can also go to Asimov or some other FTP site or archive.org and go download the Zork1.dsk and run it in an Apple II emulator. But the games themselves were abstracted out and then can be run with a modern interpreter, which people have now ported to modern platforms. But getting back to the Apple II, what Peter has now done in porting these 5.5 Infocom interpreters to ProDOS and adding support for saved games, adding support for scripting to file, is release us from the shackles of the 5.25-inch floppy disk that was the dominant and really the only method of distributing games to 8-bit Apple IIs and many other 8-bit platforms in the 80s. So when Infocom wanted to release Lost Treasures of Infocom in 1991, they targeted the 2GS, and they took advantage of their own good design decisions and released the game files as separate files. And those files are actually, you can extract them from those disk images and play them. It's literally Z3 and Z5 files and Z4 files. And you can play those on a modern computer with Zoom on Mac or Frotz or on command line. Anyway, but they released a set of 6 3.5-inch disks and wrote an interpreter for the 2GS, and that was the re-release of this pack of, I forget, 20 or so Infocom games. But if you think about the design decisions and the constraints that led to that decision, they couldn't release for 8-bit Apple IIs because not enough people who had 8-bit Apple IIs had anything other than, anything larger than a 5.25 floppy. Even by 1991. There just weren't that many people with hard drives, there just weren't that many people with, you needed a separate disk controller, even just to do 3.5-inch disks. So the 8-bit Apple IIs have always been wedded to the 5.25-inch floppy drive. And so they went GS only, even though the games themselves were originally released on 8-bit Apple IIs. And their interpreters obviously ran on 8-bit Apple IIs. But there was no way in 1991, as a commercial product, to break those chains of the 5.25-inch floppy. So fast forwarding to 2018, what does the Apple II market, the 8-bit Apple II market, look like? When just based on my own experience, this is the computer that I had in 1983. It was given to a family friend, it was given back, it was in storage for a while, the story. But in about 2010 or 2011, I got it out of storage, and it was the same machine that I had grown up on and that other people had used. And the first thing I did was buy the enhancement kit to upgrade it to an enhanced 2E, because I learned that my parents had never done that, and I learned in 2010 what that meant. And I went off to, I think, Reactive Micro and bought an enhancement kit. And the second thing I did was pull all of that out and put it back in the correct orientation. And the third thing I did was buy a mass storage device. At the time, I believe it was the Reactive Micro drive. I've since upgraded to a CFFA 3000. I've laterally moved. It's a different product. And that was it. For like a long time, I had a 1 megahertz CPU, enhanced, but running at 1 megahertz, the same extended 80-column card that I had in 1983, so 128K, and essentially infinite amounts of disk storage. I mean, just ridiculous amounts of disk storage. And this mass storage device that could run ProDOS. And then my next question, and I've seen a lot of other people on Facebook groups and Usenet groups and so on ask this question, is how do I play my games? Like now I have what I consider a modern experience where I turn the machine on and it does something, the same thing all the time. It boots off this hard drive. And I don't want to be swapping floppies because I'm not a pimply-faced teenager anymore. And so how do I play my games? And the answer is you don't. Or you do, or you get into DOS 3.3 Launcher, or you get into DOS 3.3 Master, or there were a couple of games that were ported to ProDOS specifically, and anyway, so like, and then you get down this rabbit hole, and I think that for a lot of people who have real hardware, real 8-bit hardware, that's as far as they ever get with upgrading. So they have this weird situation where they have ProDOS, mass storage, essentially infinite amounts of mass storage, running at 1 megahertz with probably 128K. Certainly, you know, the 80-column cards, you can find them in Cracker Jack boxes now. But like, why would you upgrade your RAM beyond 128K unless you're using AppleWorks or some other specialized application? Why would you buy an accelerator for several $100s since you're going to have to dial it down to 1 megahertz anyway to play all the games, which is what you really want to do. So, like that's what. Like, so if Infocom still existed, which of course they don't, what would an Infocom, you know, Lost Treasures 2K look like in 2018? And I think that it would look like a hard drive image that you could download from the internet, that booted ProDOS that you could, you know, just stick on a USB stick and run in your CFFA or run in your emulator or, you know, transfer over to your micro drive, and it would boot and it would just have the games and it would have an interpreter and then it would just have the game files. And that part is already done. They already separated out the game files, and Peter just separated out the interpreters and ported them to ProDOS. So now we're not wedded to the floppy drive at all. Everything can be on one hard drive image. So what would that look like? Infinite amounts of storage. Vast tracts of storage. How many games, how many text adventure games? Not like the later ones that Kevin and Carrington were talking about, not like Journey and you know, Arthur Excalibur and stuff, but like the classic text adventures, Spellbreaker, Wishbringer, Zork, 123, Beyond Zork, Border Zone, Bureaucracy, Mind Forever Voyaging, pick your favorite. Like how many of those could you fit on a 32 megabyte hard drive? And the answer is all of them. You could fit not only all the games, you could fit all the versions of all the games, because they did rev these over time. Zork has, I think, 11 different versions, so that was their favorite. But even some of the others, you know, they fixed bugs and so on. And they were good about visible versioning, so, you know, they have the release number and the serial number, which is really the release date. Anyway, so we have all these versions of all these games. So you could fit all of them on one hard drive and still have lots of space left over. So, like, what else could you put on a hard drive? 32 megabyte hard drive. How about box art? If we're talking about 128K 2E, we could have double high-res box art. Why not double high-res? And, you know, back in the 80s, there were all these programs, you know, Scrunch and Beagle Graphics and, like, all these things to, like, compress double high-res graphics because there was just a ridiculous amount of storage. You couldn't possibly store them uncompressed because they were, like, 8K each. Okay, we're going to store them uncompressed. It's okay. We have a lot of space. So we could get box art in double high-res and just stick it on the hard drive and still have lots of space left over. So what else could we put in this pack? One of the things that really epitomized the experience of playing Infocom text adventures was the Invisiclues, right? Well, those were on paper. Ha-ha. In the mid-90s, a group of intrepid adventurers ported them to the Infocom Z Machine interpreter. It was called the Prism Project, pretty reliable Infocom Invisiclues for Z Machine. Prism. And so theoretically, you could bundle all of the InvisiClues on and access them on a real Apple II under ProDOS using a ProDOS-based Z5 interpreter, which, by the way, we have now. Thank you, Peter. And taking advantage of all of this stuff that Peter was talking about, we have options from outside the interpreter that we can set to specify 80-column mode, 40-column mode, auto-restoring to a particular save slot, all of this. So you could put together a Bitsy Buy hard drive, ProDOS hard drive that booted to Bitsy Buy and has folders for every game, and you click through, you select the subdirectory, and you select the game, and it runs. Peter demoed that, and that works amazingly well, but it's missing. It's missing one thing. It feels like Infocom deserves a better interface. It's missing a front end to tie all of this together. What is it missing? This is it. Hold your applause. Keep holding. It is pitch dark. A front end for playing classic Infocom text adventures and other interactive fiction from a ProDOS hard drive on real hardware or in an emulator. Pictures may be taken. The first thing that you'll notice is that we have game information, including some author information, which was not readily available in the original games. This is all outside the games themselves. This is just as a separate program, but we also have things like the box text. And you can scroll the box text, because this is a GUI of sorts. For those of you who don't recognize it, this was written in WeGUI, which Quinn presented on several years ago, and which she was very excited to see actually being used in a real project. Thank you, Quinn. So these are, buttons, and that is a scrollable text view, and you can press return and it will click the play game button, and suddenly you are playing Wishbreaker. What do you want to do now? I want to quit. Yes. Yes. And he quits to ProDOS and goes back to his job. I didn't do that. Peter did that. I just made it pretty. So we have a number of games, and you can use arrow keys to hit the previous and next game buttons, or you can use the little hotkeys that I can press N right now and it'll go to the next game, that sort of thing, the highlighted hotkeys. And we have a number of games, including some that were never released for the Apple II. Because we have now unshackled ourselves from the floppy drive, and we have an interpreter that can load arbitrary Zork, the Undiscovered Underground, but it's a playable text adventure. A playable load the interpreter. And you can play. It is the default toolkit that was written in modern times by Graham Nelson and many, many others for creating a bit of quietly reboot and then go. So, one little piece of history. How am I doing on time?
You got till 11:45. You got 30 minutes.
One little piece of Infocom history is that they did not write Zork, the story. It was it was a larger game, the modern, upgraded to the modern version of the Z Machine interpreter. So you have adventure.z5, which is a file that you can just go download from the interactive fiction database or wherever your favorite place to get modern text adventures. And now you can play it. The entire game, the entire original adventure game, previously only available on the PDP or more modern computers than the 8-bit, but not in between. And now you can play, we have backported that, and you can play it on real Apple IIs. Yes?
I think what you're saying is a little misleading. So adventure is by Crowler Woods. That's a different thing than Zork altogether. Yeah. There was a large adventure, so that inspired the founders of Infocom, who were MIT graduate students working on PDP. They wrote their own adventure that was large, too large to fit on floppies, and they split this other thing.
I apologize.
That was called Dungeon.
Called Dungeon. I apologize. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we have here is an entirely different adventure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which has, in fact, been backported to the Apple II. Yes.
So this other adventure that the MIT graduate students wrote, those graduate students founded Infocom. Right. So Zork is an authentic Infocom adventure.
I take all of that back. I'm very sorry to besmirch their legacy.
Well, just for some additional context.
Yes.
The model source code for the Zork that ran on PDP-10 is on GitHub. So you can download that and if you want to import it to the Z machine.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful. I believe.
I didn't know that the whole game is
I believe it has. I think I've seen Dungeon.z5 or something similar. Okay, so we have a number of games, almost all of them here are Infocom. Here is the Z4 game that required more memory back in the day. Mindfigure Voyaging, one of the greats. Oh, yeah, a little bit here. I just want to say, here it says release 79, serial number 85, 1122, patched. As you may know, or may not know, many of the later Infocom games had in-game copy protection in the sense that you needed to have the manual to look up which buttons to press on the trunk or how to calculate the heading or, what's the name of the wizard who says blah, and you needed a variety of clever but essentially look up a word in the manual kind of thing, kind of out of game, out of band copy protections. Cucumber decided we don't need all of those, so he cracked all of them. Some of them had been cracked before, but he re-cracked all of them. We're going to submit those patches to the internet, to the interactive fiction database. Andrew Plotkin has already said he will take them. And we just mentioned at the end of the box text, we mentioned, oh yes, it's patched to remove the in-game copy protection. No longer requires code to enter the simulation. You just go right. So you don't need the original manuals to play this pack. It is self-contained because we have removed all the fiddly bits and documented them where as need be. So thank you, Cucumber, for that. I had nothing to do with that except putting in the patched versions. Interpreted code is not my specialty, but he's a reverse engineering wizard, so there we are. What else? We have Ballyhoo, we have Beyond Zork, and so on.
Show us the artwork.
Oh, you want to see the artwork? Yeah, there's a little artwork button. Hey. There's some artwork for Border Zone based on the box. Here's one. Near and dear to my heart. Don't panic. Some of them look better than others. There's only a certain amount you can do with double high res.
Is that using Bill Buckles software?
Yes, it's listed in the credits, but yes, it uses the conversion software by Bill Buckles and the front end to that buckshot by our very own Dagan Brock. And I don't think he's here today, but thank you both, Bill and Dagan, for writing these amazing tools that allow me to take modern formats, scans, and turn them back into double high-res artwork. This is one of my favorite. One of my favorite. That looks very good. Double high-res. Little Easter egg for you 16-bit people out there. I know I've been talking 8-bit, 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 but this does run on a 2GS. Yeah, I know you're out there, Antoine. I know you're watching. And if you're on a 2GS, we do have some super high-res artwork for you. Which again was created with the a separate conversion program, also by Bill Buckles, of course, because he's the master at all of this. Yes, Herbert.
This is probably a little premature for you to think about it, but with the VidHD coming up soon, do you think that the ability to show the super high res on an 8-bit using the VidHD, would that be supported?
Absolutely, absolutely. Currently, we're just doing machine check to see if we're on a 2GS, and if so, we'll switch over to the other code path to show you the other subdirectory. But we could easily, I don't know exactly what the soft switches are, but I assume John's going to document how to find out whether you have this capability, and we can easily update this code so that if your machine can display super high res, which is currently an identical question to, is your machine a 2GS? But as you point out, that will not be true once the VidHD card is out. An 8-bit Apple II will be able to display super high-res graphics through that card. So we will change it to a feature detection instead of a machine detection. Yes.
That is actually not true. A
Oh, man.
with a video overlay card can already display super high-res and could in the 80s.
Okay. If I can find one of those or get information, I would be happy to support that. Yes, Brian.
Would it be possible to add like a full screen list of all of the titles that could be selected versus not seeing everything that's available and just arrowing through?
I did not have time. We talked about a couple of different sort of browse methods that weren't like one at a time. We talked about having like a Quicksilver kind of search where you can just type a couple of keystrokes and get WB for Wishbringer or whatever. Did not have time before this initial release to do anything other than what you see.
That's beautiful.
But so what else is there? Well, as I mentioned, there are hints and music clues ported to the Z5 machine and now playable from ProDOS on an 8-bit Apple II. And you have all of your music clues, easily browsable, easily usable, not on paper. Usable from, I won't spoil anything, but it's completely keyboard navigable, completely usable, and then you can go right back.
What kind of process is it to get from like playing the game to a game as opposed to back to when you were in the game?
You will have to save the game and go back to the pitch start and go into the clues, yes. But the next thing I want to show you is, I'm going to reboot to try to get into the safe bay. That did not work. I'm going to try to get into the safe bay. That did not work. Ah, there it is. This is just a development version where I included a few saved games. So, for instance, this is something Peter was talking about. If it notices that you have saved games onto your ProDOS hard drive with infinite amounts of storage, it will change the play game button to a resume game button, and it will list all of the save slots that you have, parse out the save game file, thank you, Peter, and display this, and it will default to the last slot that you saved. So your question of what does it look like to go pop over to the InvisiClues, the answer is save your game, quit, back to pitch dark, press H for hint. You're still on that game, so just press H for hints. Go read your hints, quit, you're back to pitch dark, you're still in that game, press return, it brings up this, it auto selects the last saved game, press return again, and you're back in your game. Restore, 7, are you sure? Yes, we are now in the gallery. Score, 75. Thank you, Peter. All I did was put a pretty face on it and cheering. The cheering was the best part. So, we have resume game. Oh, and as he mentioned, some games don't have scores. They have times. So in Wishbringer, it will display the time, and all of that is encapsulated. Pitch Dark knows nothing about it. It's just like, hey, I see a saved game file. What do you got for me? And Peter wrote a zinfo.system that just takes the saved game file and returns records like this that include, slot number. Here's the room name, and here is the current time, because that's what this game has. And so you can go and resume and on slot 2, which was the last slot that I saved, and it will restore, and suddenly you are on the cliff edge at 6:01 p.m. after you've gone to the magic shop and so on.
It would be cool if the resume game screen showed somewhere which game it was, the title of the game, just because of potential mistypes or something like that when you're browsing through the list and trying to think what to do. But
that is not a terrible idea.
Thanks. This is really cool. I love this.
But wait, there's more.
What? Version.
Versions. As I mentioned, Infocom was fairly active in re-releasing games with new version numbers. Thank you very much. Oh my God, so many publishers didn't have any sort of visible version. Infocom was meticulous about it, right up until they weren't. But anyway, if I press V, I can select which version of Wishbringer I want to play. only one of these was ever released for 8-bit Apple IIs, the version release 68. Release 69 was released, but only for other platforms. They never re-released the Wishbringer disc and box for the 8-bit Apple IIs. And later, they had a bunch of games that they functionally updated, changed from Z3 to Z5, used some of the new features. It's a slightly different experience all around. This is, they call it the Solid Gold collection. Those are the ones that were in Lost Treasures of Infocom. So you can play the Lost Treasures of Infocom version of Wishbringer. Then it shows you which version you have selected here in the last. And you can play that now for the first time on an 8-bit Apple II. Play that, there it is.
The solid gold versions are cool because they have in-game hints.
The solid game versions are cool because they have in-game hints, says Kevin.
Who knows?
And who knows these things. And, okay, so that's cool. Huh? That's cool. Yes, Karen.
Multiple versions.
Yes.
Which version of the game did you select as the default? Did I just pick which version I hit play? What do I get?
I'm glad you asked. Generally, for games like Wishbringer or even Zork 1, I, as the designer, chose the highest Z3 version, so not the Solid Gold version. That I don't believe that the Solid Gold re-release is the default in any of the games. So it's the least buggy version of each game that as it was originally released for the 8-bit Apple II. So for instance, if we go back to Zork 1, there are a lot of versions of Zork 1. By default, you're going to play release 88, which is the last Z3 version. Yes, Charles?
Let's say you want to get the original release of Zork and play through it. You save a bunch of games, and you get to one of the bugs that kills the game. Can you?
No. Can you reuse save game files across versions? No.
That was my question.
You couldn't do that on real floppies either.
So even if the
So we're limited. They did not have. There is now a universal save game format called Quetzal, I believe. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. We're not using that. That was made years later. Infocom has their own, essentially undocumented, proprietary save game format that is specific to each game, and well, each interpreter at least. But the individual games
Carries actual game data.
carries actual game data, so it's it's pointing to lookup tables and things that are different across versions, that sort of thing. Item numbers, internal data structures that are different.
change between versions.
That change between versions of the same game, yes. So the general structure is the same, but the data inside the structure is different, even though they both play on the Z3 interpreter. So no. And this enforces that, like, it will just keep track of the automatically, you never see the file names, but each of these versions will have its own set of saved games and resume game dialogue that is specific to that version. So you will never, if you're just running within Pitch Dark, you will never accidentally open the wrong save game file, because that was a design decision, is that this is the entire view of the system. Is in this UI. Escape cancels, of course. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is the settings, the global settings. As Peter was saying, you can specify 40 column mode. You can specify, you can force uppercase, even in 80 column mode. Just a minute. You can script to file, and you can turn that on automatically if you would like to keep a transcript of your, and that just saves as a .txt text file that you can. There's no There's no UI within Pitch Dark to go access that, but it is just a normal text file. You can go copy it out with your favorite protocol copy program. Yes, question?
And all those versions you listed as sort of one, are those all Infocom versions? Or is
Yes.
Do I have an owner of personal software?
I'm glad you asked. As some of you may know, there was a version of Zork that was released on a 13-sector only disk, does not boot on most of the floppy drives that we have, and was released by Personal Software and had the Barbarian on the box cover. It's called the Barbarian version because of that. And Infocom hated it, and they hated the marketing, and they're like, please give us this game back, we want to do it ourselves, and that's how they came up with, the standard canonical box, the gray box that they used for many different releases. This, I can actually just press 9 because there are hotkeys. This, release 5, serial number such and such, is that version. And we can play it. It's only in 40 columns, but we can play, and this is release 5, the version that was released. This is the Barbarian release of Zork. And in fact, yes, there's the Barbarian on it. You can go see the box art if you don't know what I'm talking about. And in fact, we were, and by we I mean, of course, Peter. Peter was able to hack the Z1 interpreter to add the feature of lowercase. He mentioned this, but here it is in live demo, which is actually working. It's been working for like 20 minutes. I'm really excited. And so this is the first time that you could play this version of Zork in lowercase. It's still limited to 40 columns because that was a limitation of that particular interpreter. But we have added features. And again, by we, I mean Peter. Peter has added features to give you more choices to play these games on real hardware. I'm going to quit.
Mark?
Question.
Have you chosen to add any of the Infocom demos? I understand there's like a little butterfly or some other beta or unreleased software.
There was one game that was only released on, hey, you know what would be nice is a browse function. There is one game, or a search function. Mini Zork was only released on a cartridge for the Commodore 64. It was bundled with some magazine of something, and was never released as a floppy disk, and you can play that. There are various unreleased games and so on. We chose not to include those in this collection. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention about this is that it supports the mouse. What? Not the interpreters themselves. I didn't do that. Quinn did that. Although, and Peter added mouse support to the 2GS version of WeGUI, thanks to code from John. And if I'm leaving anybody out, I really apologize. I did very little of this. No, I'm kidding. I did some of it. But so you can go and, like, if you have a mouse or an emulator with mouse support, you can go and you can click on buttons. That's Nordenberg, by the way. And it does exactly what you think it does. Okay, so one last thing. I have 3 minutes, and we've already had a couple of questions, so I'm going to steal these 3 minutes. Text adventures, interactive fiction did not stop when Infocom died. I mentioned already that the Inform compiler was written by Graham Nelson and many others, and in the early to mid-90s, there was sort of a renaissance of interactive fiction. And if I can, hey, that worked in the first try. So now that we have all of these interpreters that run on ProDOS, they run arbitrary files, we are not limited to playing classic Infocom interactive fiction on an 8-bit Apple II. There have been a lot of games released for the Z machine since Infocom died a horrible death. And I almost called this collection 50 pitches darker. And then I didn't, so you're welcome. But I give you Pitch Darker. 41 modern interactive fiction games, starting, of course, with Curses, the classic and probably the most well-known in the modern era, but also many, many others. This one, you play a cat, and this one is really trippy, and in one of them you play a transgender serial killer, and all of those words are important. And in one of them you play a dog, and in one of them the entire game is over in one move, but you can replay, and you should, because there are other things that you can do in that one move, and over the course of multiple playings, a backstory emerges. And so there are all these experiments with the form and what it means to be an interactive fiction game or experience. Some of them are very dark. Some of them have sexually explicit content. One of them, you play a 17-year-old teenage girl stranded on the interstate, which ends exactly the way you think it does. If you want it to, because it's interactive. And if you don't, you can play it differently. And all of these were compiled in modern times, some of them as recently as 2017, thanks to our very own Charles Mangan, who wrote a program, a game for Hackfest called Gru. And Michael Sternberg ported it. It was compiled in a later version that we don't support, Z8. But Michael Sternberg, there you are, thank you, backported it to Z3, and you can now play Gru, where you are a Gru, and on the way it's meant to be played, you understand, the best possible way to play. And many other games. And if Kevin Carrington, if you're looking for new content after you finish all the Infocom games from the 80s and you want to talk about other interactive fiction games on the same podcast, they have a podcast Eaten by Gru. You all know that, right? You should definitely subscribe. And this would be a good set to start with. They're some of the best. I mean, there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, but these are some of the best of that modern interactive fiction has to offer. And with that, I bid you lunch.
As he said, it is now time for lunch, and we start again here at 1:15.
It just keeps going.
Yeah, this has been
I think there's some confusion about. Well, yeah, that explains it. The stereo cables being monoplugged, so you're only getting half the input to this, which is why you're not getting both sides.
Would you mind talking a little bit just so I can check these speakers?
One hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese, 4 limerick oysters, 5 corpulent porpoises. 1 hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese, 4 limerick oysters, 5 corpulent porpoises, 6 pairs of Donnell Verzos tweezers, 7,000 Macedonians in full battle array. Do the other one, or?
Yeah, part of the problem is that we're getting sound really only out of that speaker, and we had it all the way from very much out of here. That's now fixed.
Great.
I don't want to drop this. It's still important.
Okay, so I wonder if that would explain. So maybe that's okay. Here's the confusing thing. I had 2 of these things to try, and strictly speaking, this should simply be like headphones. Like 2 people want to listen to the same stuff. Okay. But we had one that definitely was a headphone splitter, and on this thing here, we could plug the output from this and your computer sound, and it would mix them together, and you have both sounds in the same input. For some reason, when we got this beast, you plug this in here, and if I have the microphones in, it works. If I plug in the computer sound, the microphones go away. And if you unplug the computer sound, the microphones come back again. Now I'd have to say I didn't try switching the thing around.
It's shorting these 2 together, I bet. So you're getting
because the computer, the plug that we're plugging in for the computer is still a stereo plug.
Hold on, this might be. See, this is. Oh, that's see, it's still doing. No, it's still doing stereo.
The projector a bit.
This should be mono. That's probably a problem. Yes.
But if you plug a stereo into a mono, you get the basic tip and the sheath, shouldn't you?
You should, but it's going to be 1 channel. Only the better mono jack, so you have the stereo.
Okay, so what did we do with the wire that? Oh, it's here because of the iPhone.
That's what I'm going to have to figure out.
All right,
This
so.
one was.
Well, I mean, I'm obviously not. It just seemed to me like it worked over there. Why doesn't it work here?
Oh. So you have at least 3 inputs.
Where are you coming? Got it. Oh, okay. Do the mics work now?
Test.
Okay, the mic is working. And before, if I had anything plugged in there, it did not work at all.
Yeah, see, it killed the mic. Or it died.
Okay, so I plug it in the computer.
Oh, no, that's good.
And it
It's
goes
going on
away.
low battery.
Okay, so that's. Okay, so I get sound but no mic if I plugged it. See, that's why on this thing it works.
I think the batteries are dead.
Hello?
Try it again. Just push it in. Yeah, it's still there, but it's shorted out. That would be my best guess at
But
it.
these are all stereo.
But this isn't, and you're feeding a stereo connector into it. I think that's what's happening.
Okay,
Or there's a mixer in this, so it's just the 2 levels. Like, this is not as hot as that, possibly. It's the only other thing I can think
Yeah,
of.
maybe that's it.
Which should be a feature you can turn off of. Yes.
Well, this. Yeah.
Well,
This is
it's
also
possible
supposed to have a
for me to get
mono stereo
sound
button
out
on
of
this
this
thing. I
to
find the
somewhere.
mono stereo thing. I push it and nothing happens on this thing.
Not
so I don't know
urgent,
what to
but
do with it.
That's a little weird, too. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's slightly. We're missing a microphone.
This.
There it is.
Oh.
Is there a video input?
Kevin's still wearing it. Okay, good. Fine.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, thank you for looking at that. I appreciate it.
Do you want the audio in as well?
Go feed your face.
No, not from. Okay. No.
Can you hand me my laptop? It's just behind you.
Wings? You want the quid sticker?
Yes. Sorry, there's the quid sticker. Perfect sense. And I need the HDMI here. Figure out how to do the switching.
I don't know if you need this adapter thing, but we have.
I don't think I
that.
do.
Okay.
Glad this is done with no one in here.
I wanted this to be as surprising as I could.